Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're going to step outside in 1888, New York, just for a moment. It's March. You can smell coal smoke in the air and horse dung somewhere underfoot. Your coat's thin, too thin, honestly. But you're not worried. People say it might snow tomorrow, but it's March. You'll be fine, right? You won't. You probably won't survive this. That's not me being dramatic. The Great Blizzard of 1888 didn't just knock people off their feet. It erased entire blocks from memory, turned trains into coffins, and buried New York in ways it never expected. And yes, you're going to live through all of it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and the time you're watching this. I love knowing where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to a creaky floorboard and the faint clang of a milk cart down the street. It's March 11th, 1888, a Sunday. And if you're honest, the day feels unremarkable. Just cold, not brutal. There's a stillness outside, sure, but that's typical for this time of year. Early spring can't decide if it wants to live or die. You're in a modest row house in Manhattan's Lower East Side. The pipes groan when you fill the basin with cold water. There's no central heating, no one's spoiled like that. Just a wood stove and a pot-belly coal heater puffing away in the corner. Your breath fogs the glass as you glance out the window. Snow? Just a little. A flurry at best. You shrug into your jacket and prepare to head to church, or, if you're feeling less pious, to the corner tavern that serves hot rum and watery stew. Either way, you step out the door. The wind catches you immediately. Sharp, snappy and mean. But nothing out of the ordinary. The sky's overcast. The snow is falling in dry, whispery flakes, the kind that never really stick. You watch a kid toss a snowball across the street. It shatters on a wall and sprays into dust. He laughs, and you smile. New Yorkers are tough. This isn't anything new, but something's off. By noon, the barometer plummets. You don't own a barometer, but old Mr. Clayton on the corner does, and he's been muttering about storm signs all week. You remember his warning now, though you'd rolled your eyes at the time. Everyone's always predicting the end of the world, but now the sky's darkening in a way that doesn't feel like evening. The flurries are turning jagged. Wind rushes down the alleys like it's angry. Still, you don't panic. It's Sunday. People are home. It's cold, but there's stew on the stove and hot bricks wrapped in flannel for your feet. You hunker down. Your neighbour, Mrs. Riley, knocks to borrow a match. She's grumbling about her chimney, but she hands you a slice of gingerbread and wishes you warmth. There's a quiet camaraderie in these little exchanges. New York knows how to handle winter. But then night falls, and things change. You hear it before you see it. The wind transforms into a howl that wraps around the house like a living thing. It rattles your windows in short, violent bursts. You peer outside again, and now visibility's down to nothing. The street lamps are on barely, their orange halos flickering in the blinding white. Snow comes sideways now. It's not falling, it's flying. The entire city has become a snow globe being shaken by a giant's hand. Here's the thing about March blizzards. They're weird. They sneak up like spring and hit like January. What's happening outside is a nor'easter, a violent coastal cyclone slamming into an Arctic cold front at just the right angle to create a meteorological monster. But of course you don't know any of that. No one does. The US Weather Bureau is still in its infancy, and it mostly guesses based on vibes and pigeon reports. By midnight, something primal tells you this storm is different. A neighbour pounds on your door. He says the stable down the block collapsed. A horse is missing. A woman's stuck inside her house because the snow is sealing her door shut. You grab your scarf and run out to help, and then it hits you. The cold doesn't just bite, it consumes. The moment you step outside, it's in your lungs, in your teeth, behind your eyes. The snow isn't soft, it's granular, dinging like sandpaper. The wind shoves you sideways. You take 3 steps and realise how foolish it was to come out. You can't even see the gas lamp 10 feet away. You reach the neighbour's stoop and bang on her door, yelling her name. No answer. You dig with your hands until the door cracks open, and she stumbles out, crying, shivering, grateful. Together, you lean into the gale and make it back. Your gloves are soaked. Your cheeks sting. Your legs feel like they're turning into sticks. You've never been this cold. Back inside, you throw extra coal on the fire and wrap yourself in every blanket you own. There's no going out again. Not until this ends, whenever that is. Later that night, as you try to sleep, you hear the wind again. But this time there's another sound layered beneath it. The distant crack of something snapping, the crash of glass, the creak of trees bending too far. And where New York is breaking. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old wood groan in protest. The heat doesn't reach your toes, the storm doesn't stop. Historically, this storm was preceded by a stretch of unseasonably warm weather, a weird 70-degree day just 2 days before. That heat turned to rain and the rain froze, and then snow slammed on top of it. That's part of why the city never saw it coming. People were walking around in shirt sleeves, debating early baseball, and then boom, whiteout. But here's a fringe fact. Some folks in Boston claimed they saw strange lights in the snow. Blue flickers, like lightning, caught in a jar. Scientists now think it might have been electrical snow glow, static charged particles in the air. Or it could have been nothing. After all, people hallucinate weird things in cold weather. There's debate over just how fast the temperature dropped that first night too. Was it gradual, or was there a sudden plummet? Some early records suggest the mercury fell 30 degrees in just a few hours. Others say that's exaggeration. Either way, your fingers are numb and you still haven't slept. The blizzard has begun, and you're already in it. When you open your eyes the next morning, it's dim. Not dark, not light. Just this strange grey half-glow that fills the room like smoke. You're not sure if it's dawn or Darcy. The coal stove is still smouldering, but the air is cold enough to see your breath again. You shuffle toward the window, still wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket, and wipe away the fog with the edge of your sleeve. The street is gone. Not in a poetic way. Like, literally gone. There's no sign of the cobblestone, the sidewalk, or even the stoop across from you. Just a flat, white sheet stretching across the whole view, broken only by the tip of a gas lamp poking out like a matchstick stuck in a cake. You blink, you squint. No, you're not dreaming. Snow has swallowed everything. The storm didn't stop overnight, it intensified. You thought you were witnessing something serious yesterday, but that was just the appetizer. Now comes the full-course blizzard, and it's not delicate. The snow isn't falling in peaceful drifts. It's being hurled sideways in bursts of 50, 60, even 70 miles per hour. Gusts slam against the walls so hard that you can feel the floorboards vibrate. Outside, it looks like some angry god is shaking flour from the sky and screaming while doing it. You throw on your thickest coat and head to the front door, just to peek. It takes some force to get it open. The drift's already halfway up the frame, packed tight. You push with your shoulder, gritting your teeth, until a wave of snow falls inside like a breaking dam. You immediately regret it. Wind slashes in, stinging your face, dragging flakes into your front room. You shove the door shut, panting, snow melting down your collar. So, going outside is officially off the menu. You light a second oil lamp, pour what's left of the coffee beans into the grinder, and get to work. The sound is a comfort, something normal in a day that already feels anything but. From the window you see movement, just barely. A shadow perhaps. Someone stumbling through the snow, head bent against the wind. Or maybe it's just your reflection. Hard to say. You eat leftover potatoes and one heel of bread for breakfast. No milk, no meat, no eggs. And you're one of the lucky ones. People farther uptown are already burning furniture. Some of them won't survive the night. Not from the storm directly, but from the cold and hunger that follow. Back in 1888, there's no real snow removal system in place. The city depends on horse-drawn carts and physical labour, which is cute, considering drifts are already piling up over 10 feet and climbing. In places like Midtown, it's worse. The wind funnels through the grid of streets, sculpting monstrous peaks of snow and dropping them wherever it pleases. On some blocks, it buries first-floor windows. On others, it covers entire homes. A few unlucky folks wake up to find they're completely snowed in. Windows blacked out, doors sealed shut. You're not quite there yet, but it's not out of the question. You spend the morning pacing, checking the stove, staring out at the sun-swirling void. Your neighbour, remember Mrs. Riley with the gingerbread? She doesn't knock today. Her stoop is buried. You consider digging her out, but the thought of stepping outside again makes your stomach twist. You tie a scarf around your face and crack the window to yell her name. No answer. Hopefully, she's hunkered down like you, keeping warm with tea and prayers. Hopefully. Mid-morning, the temperature drops even more. The snow takes on a new sound, a sharp, brittle hiss that cuts through the air. It's dry now, almost dusty, and it moves more like smoke than water. Every gap in your window frame whistles. You shove cloths into the cracks and light a second burner. You're not sure how much coal you have left. The wind begins to play tricks on your ears. You keep thinking you hear footsteps, voices, even laughter. Once, you swear you hear the high warbling ring of a bell. When you open the door a slivsia, there's nothing. Just white chaos. The air smells like iron and ice. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crash jolts you to your feet. You stare at the ceiling, heart pounding. Was that the roof? You race upstairs, slipping on the icy steps in your socks. At the top, you find the source. The old tree next to your house has finally given in. A huge branch, thick as your waist, crashed into your neighbour's roof and rolled down onto your back stairs, breaking the railing. The wood creaks under the weight of the snow now packed on top. That's when you finally feel it. This storm isn't just weather. It's a siege. It's surrounding you, testing you, breaking things apart one by one. You're not just snowed in, you're under attack. The strange thing, in some parts of the city, uptown, in Harlem or over in Brooklyn, people are still trying to go about their day. That morning, a few bakeries actually open, mostly because the bakers slept there the night before. They hand out burnt loaves and leftover biscuits through half-shuttered doors. People make desperate dashes from block to block, faces wrapped in scarves, slipping on invisible ice sheets. Some try to get to work, others are just trying to get home. Here's a quirky little detail. Pigeons. New Yorkers in 1888 rely heavily on carrier pigeons, and during the blizzard, there are reports of birds just freezing mid-flight, falling from the sky like feathered stones. It's weird, a little horrifying and entirely real. The birds don't stand a chance. Neither do the few ferry boats still trying to cross the East River. Ice clogs the waterway. Gusts push vessels off course. The crews can't see 10 feet ahead. By midday, all river traffic is shut down. You're officially on an island now, and people are starting to realise that nobody's coming to help. There's no cavalry, no National Guard, no FEMA. The mayor hasn't even made a statement. And how could he? The telegraph wires are down, Long Island is cut off. Trains from Boston and Philadelphia have vanished into drift somewhere in the countryside. The only updates come from the people risking their lives to knock on doors and pass the message along. Stay inside, don't go out, you won't come back. You sip the last of your coffee, bitter, lukewarm, but comforting, and wrap yourself in another blanket. It's only the first full day, and the snow is still falling. There's a debate among historians about how much snow actually came down that Monday. Official records say 21 inches in New York City, but that number doesn't account for the towering drifts. Some say it was closer to 40. Others claim drifts reached 50 feet in certain alleyways. There's no consensus, because the storm didn't just pile up snow evenly, it flung it around like a drunk god with a feather pillow. Outside, you see a flicker of movement again. Someone in the distance dragging a sack behind them, fighting against the wind. You wonder who they are. You wonder if they'll make it home. You wonder if you will too. By the time the second morning arrives, if you can even call it morning, you've lost all sense of time. The light outside never changes. It's this dull, bruised grey that slips through the cracks in your window like smoke from a dying fire. The wind has lost none of its fury. In fact, it feels meaner now, more deliberate, like it's not just blowing snow, but throwing it at you, daring you to come outside. You don't. Your body is sore from sleeping upright near the stove, wrapped in every blanket you own. Plus one rug and what might be your great-aunt's old shawl. You're warm enough to stay alive, but not comfortable enough to forget where you are. Your mouth tastes like cold metal. Your back aches. You haven't changed clothes since Saturday night. You try to stretch, but the walls creak in protest, like the whole house is shifting slightly under the weight. You listen closely. The drifts must be close to the windows now, maybe even past them. You take a deep breath and open the curtains. Gone. The outside world is just gone. Your entire window is packed solid with snow, like someone pressed a sheet of white paper against the glass. It's smooth, silent, and just a little terrifying. You knock on it. It's like knocking on cold stone. The only light filtering through is that eerie grey glow, as if the city has been buried under a giant snowbank and left to rot. This is when it hits you. You're trapped. Not in the metaphorical sense, not in the I'm so over this weather sense. Truly, physically trapped. The front door won't open anymore. You try it, you push, it doesn't budge. Even if you wanted to risk it, there's no way out without digging. You check the back door, same story. Snow has wedged itself against every exit, sealing you inside like a tomb. You think of Mrs. Riley again. You haven't seen her in over 24 hours, you knock on the shared wall, nothing. You put your ear to it, Still nothing. Maybe she's sleeping, maybe she's fine. You tell yourself she's fine, but your gut's already turning with worry. Out on the streets, if you could call them streets anymore, some New Yorkers are trying to dig themselves out. They use coal shovels, soup pots, even firewood. It doesn't work. The drifts are just too high and the snow's packed like stone. Some families are completely snowed over, chimneys barely breathing above the surface. One man digs a tunnel from his second-floor window just to reach his neighbour across the way. He ties a rope around his waist and crawls out like a groundhog, leaving a tiny trail behind him. Miraculously, he makes it, but barely. His fingers are black with frostbite when they pull him back in. You chew slowly on a biscuit that tastes like the back of a drawer. It's dry, crumbling in your mouth, but you savour it. You don't know how long you'll be stuck here. You make a mental list. 3 more potatoes, half a jar of pickled cabbage, 1 tin of beans, and 2 apples that are halfway to mush. You'll need to ration everything. Water isn't a problem, you can melt snow, but fuel? That's going to run out fast. You throw a broken stool into the stove, it flares up and hisses like it's in pain. Sometime mid-morning you hear a sound that doesn't belong. It's faint, almost like a whistle. You rush to the back window and scrape away a peephole in the ice on the pane. Down the alley there's movement. A figure stumbling through waist-deep snow, arms wrapped around a bundle. A child, a sack, it's hard to tell. The person stops, leans once on a wall, and then disappears behind a drift. You pound on the glass, but it's useless. The wind eats the sound. You stand there for a long time, breathing hard. Your breath fogs the glass. You suddenly realise your hands are shaking. Part fear, part cold, probably both. Here's what you don't know. At this exact moment, New York is essentially shut down. All trains have stopped. Telegraph lines are snapped and tangled in the snow like spiderwebs. No messages are getting in or out. The elevated trains are frozen solid. The streets are impassable. Ferries can't cross the East River, the docks are buried, and the water's choked with ice floes. Even if you had a horse, it would freeze before you got halfway down the block, so what do? You stay put. You wait. You listen. But then something else happens. A deep, hollow thump, like something falling. You freeze. Another thump. Closer. Then a muffled crack. The building shudders. That's not good. You rush upstairs again, afraid the roof's collapsing. But when you reach the top floor, you spot it. Part of the neighbour's chimney has fallen, snapping under the weight of snow and ice. The bricks are half buried in the drift between your buildings. You peer out through the tiny window again. For a moment, the wind lets us up just enough to give you a glimpse of what used to be your street. Or more accurately, what's above it now. The snowdrifts aren't just tall, they're sculpted. The wind has carved them into sharp ridges and flowing waves like a frozen ocean. At some points they rise over 2 stories high. You see the spire of a church jutting out like a shipwreck. A trolley car sits sideways, almost completely buried, only its brass pole sticking out like a twig. People used to ride that to work, now it looks like a grave marker. Incredibly, a few are still trying to get around. One man rides a sleigh pulled by 2 shivering dogs. Another is wrapped in so many blankets he looks like a walking laundry pile, dragging a sled filled with firewood. At one point, a woman in boots up to her thighs climbs onto the roof of a stalled stagecoach and shouts down to someone buried below. She's yelling a name. You can't hear it, but you feel the desperation in her voice. Then she vanishes into the snow. A strange fact, during this blizzard, some people used ladders to get in and out of second-floor windows. They walked across rooftops to visit neighbours or to search for survivors. A few tried fashioning snowshoes out of barrel staves and broomsticks. One man reportedly strapped iron skillets to his feet. It didn't work, but you have to admire the creativity. Historians still debate how the storm became so severe, especially given how quickly it formed. Some argue that the convergence of the Gulf Stream and a polar vortex created a freak superstorm. Others think the forecasting systems were just so primitive that nobody saw the warning signs. Either way, no one was ready for this. You sure weren't. You retreat from the window and stoke the fire. The wind howls louder now, like it knows you're afraid. You pull your coat tighter and sit down near the stove. Your world is no longer the city. It's this room, these walls, the orange glow of burning wood. Everything else is gone, and outside the snow keeps falling. By now, the storm has moved beyond historic and into something darker, stranger, like it's trying to erase the city from the map. You sit in the dim light of the oil lamp, staring into the dancing shadows it casts across your walls. The stove crackles faintly behind you, but it's burning low, too low. You have 2 more sticks of firewood, 1 broken chair leg, and a pile of yellowed newspapers. That's it. After that, you start tearing apart the banister. You know you should ration the fuel, but the wind won't let you think straight. It's been screaming for more than 30 hours, and it never stops. It rises, dips, moans, never quiet, never still. It seeps into your thoughts like fog through the cracks, and there's no escape. You try to read, but your eyes blur. You try to sleep, but your toes throb from the cold. You try to hum, to distract yourself, but your voice sounds small and scared. Eventually, you press your face to the glass again, desperate for a glimpse of something human. You see nothing. The snow has smothered everything into silence, except, wait, there's movement again. A hunched figure wrapped in what looks like a bedspread, crawling over the top of a drift. You blink. It's hard to tell through the glass, but they seem to be dragging something behind them, a sled, a box. You slam your palm on the window and shout, no use. Your voice doesn't even reach you. The wind snatches it away before it leaves your lips. The figure disappears again behind a ridge of snow. You stare at that spot for a long time. What you don't realise yet is that almost everyone is trapped just like you. All over Manhattan, people are discovering they can't get out. In the richer neighbourhoods uptown, servants are sleeping in boiler rooms to stay warm, and the well-to-do are starting to panic. Even the Astors and Vanderbilts can't get food deliveries. No one can. Grocery stores are closed, horses are frozen in their stables, and the ice has sealed all shipping lanes. Entire tenement blocks go dark. And in those cramped buildings, where too many people live on too little heat, it's not just uncomfortable, it's deadly. Around midday, the sky changes colour. It goes from gunmetal grey to something pale and sickly. For a moment, the wind drops. It's not calm, but it's less aggressive. You take this as your chance. You throw on your boots, wrap your scarf around your face 3 times, and grab your shovel. The front door takes everything you've got. You wedge your shoulder into it, brace your feet, and push. It opens maybe 4 inches, just enough to squeeze out sideways. You step into a tunnel of snow as if someone carved a slot through ice just for you. You're chest deep within seconds. The snow is dry and tight-packed, and every movement feels like swimming through clay. You start digging. Not much, just enough to clear a path to the sidewalk, or at least where you think the sidewalk should be. It's hard to tell anymore. The landmarks are gone. The stoops have vanished. Mailboxes are under your boots. Somewhere nearby there's a street lamp, but it's completely submerged. You find it by tripping over its glass. Your fingers go numb within minutes. You try switching hands, shaking them, blowing into your mittens. Nothing helps. Every few seconds, a gust of wind finds its way into your scarf, sending ice crystals down your neck like needles. And the silence, that eerie, death-like quiet between windbursts, only makes it worse. It's like the city itself is holding its breath. Eventually you make it to Mrs. Riley's door. You dig her out with your shovel, hacking at the drift until her frame becomes visible. You knock, hard. Nothing. You knock again, still nothing. You call her name. After a long pause there's a sound, a faint shuffle. And then the door cracks open. She appears, wrapped in every blanket she owns, looking 10 years older than she did 2 days ago. "Oh," she says, voice raspy. "Thought I was dreaming." You don't speak. You just hand her the end of the rope you brought. Together, you tie yourselves together like mountaineers and shuffle back toward your house, 1 foot at a time. Once inside, you make tea. Well, hot water with a single mint leaf, but it passes. She sits near your stove, hands outstretched, eyes glassy. She hasn't eaten since Sunday. You share what you have, splitting a potato and scraping the last of the beans into a pan. You watch her eat slowly, reverently, like it's a sacred ritual. Out in the rest of the city, it's chaos. In downtown Manhattan, snowdrifts are so high they've swallowed entire buildings. People are tunneling between houses, carving hand-dug passageways from one cellar to the next. A few churches open their doors, but only for those lucky enough to reach them. Most hospitals are cut off. Deliveries of coal, milk, medicine, forget it. One doctor spends 10 hours on foot trying to reach a patient a few blocks away. He collapses outside the building and never gets up again. Some people try to leave the city altogether. They fail. A group of desperate workers attempts to walk across the frozen East River to Brooklyn. Halfway through, the ice cracks beneath them. They scramble back in panic. The river groans like a wounded beast. No one tries again that day, and still no help arrives. Here's a weird one for you. In some parts of town, people report strange sounds in the snow, low hums, like an organ playing underwater. Some think it's pipes straining. Others say it's the sound of the ice itself shifting beneath the weight. A few claim it's voices, whispers in the storm. Scientists now chalk it up to acoustics, snowpack vibrations, and, let's be honest, sheer terror. But in that moment, people believe. Because why not? The world outside feels haunted already. There's still debate about how strong the wind really got. Some sources say gusts reached over 80 miles per hour, enough to snap trees like twigs and toss full-grown men into snowbanks like rag dolls. Others think those numbers are exaggerated, the product of panic memories and tall tales. What we do know, buildings collapsed, roofs caved in, chimneys toppled, people died just walking outside. Back in your home, you and Mrs. Riley sit in silence. There's nothing to say, just the rhythmic hiss of the wind against the window and the occasional crack of wood as the fire shifts. She thanks you softly. You nod. You're too tired to speak. You add the last of the wood to the stove and watch it catch. You wonder what tomorrow will look like, if there is a tomorrow. And still the snow keeps falling. By the time the third day begins, New York is no longer a city. It's a snow-covered carcass, frozen in place and wrapped in silence. You've now reached that strange, surreal place where time doesn't move in hours, but in stove refills and flickering lamp oil. You measure your day by how many sips of water it takes to melt a cup of snow, how long it takes the wind to lull or rage, how many times Mrs. Riley coughs during the night. She's still with you, thank God, though her face has taken on the pale, waxy look of someone who's been too cold for too long. You've bundled her up in everything you can find, including an old tapestry that once hung over your door. She calls it her queen's cloak, and chuckles weakly whenever she adjusts it around her shoulders. You try to keep the mood light, but the reality presses in from every side. The front door hasn't budged since yesterday. Even the tunnel you managed to dig is now gone, buried under another mountain of snow that formed overnight. You open the back window instead, just wide enough to peer out. What greets you is no longer shocking, it's just white, piled high in unnatural shapes, dunes where sidewalks used to be, a frozen, foaming ocean of snow. But this morning there's something else, a kind of quiet that's different from before, not silence, emptiness. The storm has weakened. The sky, still grey, holds a certain softness to it now. The wind, though still present, howls less and sighs more. You feel it before you realise it. A shift. The storm might be ending. Of course it's not over. Not really. The snow is still falling, slow and heavy like feathers from a torn pillow. But the worst of the wind is gone. You can actually hear things now. Creaks, footsteps overhead, even the distant bark of a dog. It's like the city is beginning to exhale, testing the air after 3 days of holding its breath. You take that as your cue. You boil another kettle, share the last apple with Mrs. Riley, and grab your shovel again. This time the snow resists less. It's dense but not packed, and after 20 minutes of sweaty, freezing labour, you manage to open the front door wide enough to squeeze out. The cold hits you like a slap, sharp and immediate, but the air is still at least. For the first time in days, it feels possible to move. Outside, the street is unrecognisable. Buildings look half as sunken, with rooftops barely visible above mounds of snow. You can't tell where the road ends and the sidewalk begins. It's just one continuous, undulating landscape. The gas lamps are buried. So are the benches, the fences, the street signs. A horse carcass lies stiff near a lamppost, legs pointed skyward like twisted tree limbs. You don't stare for long. You start moving down the street, wading through knee-deep snow that pulls at your legs like quicksand. Every step is a battle, but you're not alone. Heads begin to poke out of the windows. Doors crack open. People emerge cautiously, like animals after a long hibernation, blinking in the dim light. You nod to each other. No one smiles yet, but there's relief in the eye contact. You're all still here. That counts for something. You reach the corner and see what's left of the old bakery. The sign has collapsed, crushed by the weight of the snow above it. But the owner's there, apron dusted with frost, handing out the burnt rolls and cold coffee through a tiny opening in the snowbank. You take one, thank him with a nod and move on. Everywhere you go, you hear stories. A man who tried to get to his sick daughter's house but collapsed just 2 doors down. A boy who froze to death clutching his dog. A woman who gave birth in an apartment with no midwife, no heat, no help. Somehow, both she and the baby survived. Somehow. Others weren't so lucky. The ferry terminals are still shut down. The rivers are frozen solid in places, with ice thick enough to walk across, if you dare. Some have. Desperate commuters, newspaper boys, errand runners. One man pulled his daughter across the East River on a wooden door. You hear about it from a neighbour with wind-burned cheeks and a trembling voice. Didn't even look down, he says. Just prayed the whole way. Here's something strange. Dozens of telegraph poles have snapped like matchsticks, pulled down by the weight of ice or felled by the wind. As they went, the wires tangled, coiled and sparked in the storm. Some say they saw bluish lightning arcing from pole to pole, crackling in the snow. The power of the storm was enough to warp iron. In some parts of the city, the air itself seemed to glow for a moment, like something supernatural had passed through. Fringe, maybe, but in a storm like this, with every law of nature bending under its weight, who's to say what's real? Now here's where things get even stranger. The government? Nowhere to be found. The mayor, Abram Hewitt, is silent. City Hall's buried. There's no plan, no guidance. People are left to fend for themselves. Some communities organise rescue teams, tying ropes around their waists to search for the trapped or deliver coal and food. Others loot abandoned stores or dig into snowbanks looking for valuables. You judge them, but you're not far from desperate yourself. There's a growing anger in the air. Why wasn't the city warned? Why weren't the rail lines shut down in time? Why did they let the wires stay above ground, vulnerable to every gust of wind? Some already talk about what must change after this, if they survive it, but not everyone is full of rage. Some are just making do. You watch a group of children slide down a snowbank as tall as a house using metal sheets as a makeshift sleds. Their laughter echoes strangely, but it's real. For them, this is all an adventure, a once-in-a-lifetime thrill. You don't have the heart to tell them they're sledding over the roof of a wagon filled with frozen chickens. They'll find that out soon enough. A fact for you, the blizzard will kill over 400 people across the Northeast, with nearly 200 in New York City alone, and most won't die from cold exposure or even falling debris. They'll suffocate, trapped in snowbanks, or be struck by collapsing buildings. Some won't be found for weeks, a few, never. And still you dig, you help where you can. You check on neighbours, you lend your shovel to a stranger and guide a lost child back to his doorstep. You see the cities start to breathe again. Not fully, not easily, but enough. Chimneys belch smoke, doors creak open, people start calling out names, one block to the next. Not all of them are answered. By dusk, the wind returns, just slightly, reminding you it's not finished yet. But the storm has spent its worst fury. You trudge home, snow clinging to your legs, fingers numb, face raw. When you step back inside, Mrs. Riley's eyes light up. Still alive then, she says. You nod. You collapse beside the stove and feel it, that first glimmer of hope under the heaviness. The blizzard isn't over, but something has shifted. The city is still frozen, but you're moving again. You wake the next morning not to wind, not to snow, but to a strange, unfamiliar quiet. It's the kind of silence that almost feels heavy, pressing into your ears like cotton. For the first time in days, there's no howling, no rattling pains, no dull thumps from branches falling in the distance. Just stillness. Cold, deep stillness. Your first thought is that maybe you've gone deaf, or worse. But then you hear it. The gentle crackle of the stove's dying embers, the subtle creak of your house settling, the soft breathing of Mrs. Riley from her makeshift bed near the fire. You're not dead. The storm might actually be over. You sit up slowly, bones aching, muscles sore from the days of shoveling and rationing and hauling water. The air is bitter inside the house, but not moving. That alone is cause for cautious celebration. You tug on your boots, which are stiff from the cold, and cross to the front window. The frost has thinned slightly. You press your fingers against the glass and see sky. Pale, bleak, clouded, but sky no more whiteout, no more endless grey gauze. Just above the drift that still swallows most of your doorframe, you see the top edge of a neighbour's chimney belching smoke. Someone else is alive and burning coal. You lean your forehead against the glass and exhale slowly. 3 days of storm. You made it. Now comes the hard part. You brew the last of your weak tea, break the final biscuit in half with Mrs. Riley, and share a look that says more than words could. She's pale and slow-moving, but still here. You bundle her in her queen's cloak once more and tuck her beside the stove before heading back out to face the new world. Getting the front door open is easier this time. The snow isn't actively pushing back anymore, but the drift is still waist-high. You dig with steady rhythm, careful not to twist your back or lose your footing. The sky is blank and dull above you, with no sun in sight, just that weak post-blizzard glow that lights everything with a greyish tint. It's like the colour's been drained from the city. You climb out like a miner and make your way down what used to be your street. The landscape is surreal, buildings buried up to their second floors, carriages frozen in place, wheels pointing skyward like toppled beetles. The city's famous brownstones are now just a series of snow humps, their stoops completely submerged. You can't tell where the curb ends and the street begins. Everything is just level. An entire city flattened under snow. It's not just snow though, it's bodies too. You see your first one an hour after sunrise. A man, mid-30s maybe, curled on his side like he's simply laid down to nap. His coat is crusted with frost, his hat still perched awkwardly on his head. His eyes are closed, face peaceful. You pause for a moment, not quite knowing what to do. You don't recognise him, and maybe that's a mercy. You move on. Later you find a young boy half buried under a fallen sign. His scarf is still wrapped around his neck, a pair of snow-crusted mittens clutched to his chest. Someone has already placed a blanket over his face. Maybe that's all they could do. You pass others. People digging, people weeping, people standing still, dazed, as if they've stepped into another country. Entire carts have been overturned and are frozen in place, their horses long dead, stiff-legged and frozen in strange, awful postures. Telegraph poles are snapped like twigs, and the wires are everywhere. Snarled around fences, tangled in trees, lying across rooftops like metallic spiderwebs. And still, people move. That's the part that stays with you most. Despite the snow, the ice, the sheer weight of the destruction, people are climbing over drifts, tunneling through alleys, calling out names. Mrs. Adler? Jimmy? Anyone in there? It's a citywide roll call shouted block by block. In some places, you see crude flags sticking up out of the snow, makeshift markers where someone went under to dig. In others, you see long wooden poles laid across rooftops, guiding people from house to house. Entire neighbourhoods have been transformed into maze-like networks of rooftop paths and snow tunnels. You pass a man with a rope tied around his waist, the other end secured to a group of 3 teenagers holding shovels and lanterns. They nod grimly as you pass. Rescue parties. And somehow, amid the devastation, life continues. A street corner once filled with vendors is now a haphazard trading post. A woman from the bakery, you think her name is Mags, hands out scraps of bread and spoonfuls of cold stew. No prices, just food. A cobbler has turned his tiny workshop into a warming station. Fire roaring inside as neighbours take turns stepping in for 5-minute bursts of heat. One man starts boiling snow in a huge metal drum over a fire pit built in the middle of the street. It smells like smoke and rust and wet wool. But people line up anyway. It's hot. That's all that matters. The mayor? Nowhere to be seen. The government's response has been laughable so far. Officials have vanished into their brownstones or simply gone silent. Rumours say a few telegraph messages did get through to Washington before the lines collapsed, but there's been no reply. A handful of soldiers are reportedly helping dig out rail lines farther upstate. Not here, not in the bureaus. In New York City, the people are saving themselves. The ferries still aren't moving, the rivers are still sealed. A few daring souls are skating across the East River now, children mostly, and one man pushing a sled loaded with potatoes. The police try to stop them, yelling from the banks. No one listens. There are no rules right now, only instinct. Here's a curious detail. Several newspapers do still manage to publish during the blizzard, albeit on skeleton crews. Reporters sleep at the presses and write by candlelight. Delivery boys become legends, tying papers to sleds, sneaking through tunnels, chucking newsprint through second-story windows. The headlines are pure chaos. City under ice, worst storm in living memory, and one slightly melodramatic but not inaccurate, hundreds may be dead. There's scholarly debate, even now, over just how much of the city's infrastructure truly failed that week. Some argue the telegraph collapse was the main catalyst of panic, that if lines had stayed up, the city might have coordinated a better response. Others say the snow alone would have buried any plan. In truth, it was both. A lack of communication combined with a storm of freak strength left millions blind and scrambling. You included. You return home just as the light begins to fade. You've seen enough for one day, maybe a lifetime. Mrs. Riley's still there, huddled and quiet. You hand her the bread someone gave you, the bit of stew you managed to beg. She smiles, murmurs something about miracles, and eats slowly, savouring every bite. You sit beside her near the stove and stare at the little flame flickering inside, the last chunk of wood spitting and popping. Outside, New York is still frozen, but there's something in the air now. A shift, a tension lifting ever so slightly. It's not over, but the worst might be behind you. You wake again before dawn, if you can even call it that. The sky outside is still more ash than light, and your body feels like someone stuffed it full of wet sand. Every joint aches, every finger is slow to respond, and you swear your knees have aged 10 years since Saturday. Still, you push yourself up because something new is tugging at your senses, an absence. The silence has changed again. It's quieter now, less eerie, more tired, and then it hits you. There's no more snow falling. For the first time in what feels like a week, the air is still. No flakes drifting past your window, no drumming on the roof, just stillness. Cold, bitter stillness, but mercifully dry. You take your time bundling up. The wind might be gone, but the cold has settled in deep. That kind of cold where the floor feels like glass under your socks, and your breath fogs in front of your mouth, even indoors. You're running low on firewood, and the house smells like burnt paper and old potatoes. Mrs. Riley hasn't said much this morning. She's still tucked into her pile of blankets like a forgotten relic, murmuring half-formed prayers under her breath. You leave her a small crust of bread and a boiled mug of snow milk, and tell her you're heading out again. She doesn't respond, just nods faintly and closes her eyes. Outside, it's a different kind of horror. The blizzard's tantrum has ended, but what it left behind is worse in some ways. The snow is no longer soft or powdery, it's hard-packed now, below, dense and unyielding, like someone froze a sea mid-wave. It crunches and creaks underfoot, and in some spots, it gleams with a crust of ice so thick you could skate on it. You nearly fall twice before you reach the end of your block, and then you get your first real look at what the blizzard has done. Midtown, or at least the part of it you're closest to, has been transformed into a ghost town. The street that used to pulse with noise, horses, carriages, barking vendors, children running between fruit carts, is now silent. Not quiet, silent, like a museum exhibit of a city frozen in time. Carts are trapped halfway through the intersections, their wheels locked in ice. Horses, at least the ones not already buried, stand stiff in place, eyes glazed, mouths open as if frozen mid-breath. Awnings are collapsed, storefronts buckled under the sheer weight of snow. And above it all, the wires, those ever-present telegraph and trolley wires, drape in great broken loops from pole to pole, many of them snapped, coiled in the snow like snakes made of copper and ice. You walk slowly, careful to avoid anything that looks too unstable. There are places where the drifts tower over you, where the snow has swallowed the first floors of entire buildings. You pass a window with a curtain fluttering just above the surface of a drift, as if the house has been buried in an avalanche. And in a way, it has. You catch sight of a man standing on a second-story balcony, peering down like a castaway on a rooftop. He waves weakly. You wave back. "Midtown's dead," he says, voice hoarse. You nod. "You okay?" He gives a shrug and disappears back inside. That's about as much conversation as anyone can manage right now. As you keep moving, you start to notice little signs of life reasserting itself. A ladder here, bridging one roof to another. A rope line strung between windows, chimneys puffing quietly into the sky. Someone's hung out a bedsheet with the word "help" scrawled in ash. A few people are clearing snow from their second-story windows, forming crude passageways between buildings. In some parts of town, they're calling these walks. Rooftop routes from house to house, the only safe way to move without falling into a 10-foot drift or getting impaled by broken wood. You help a man dig out a stairwell, both of you sweating under layers of wool despite the freezing air. His daughter's trapped inside, but alive, thank God. He offers you a biscuit and a sip of something that smells like gin. You accept both without a second thought. You ask him about the trains. "Gone," he says. "Buried somewhere outside Albany, maybe. Nobody knows. I heard one's still stuck with 50 people inside and no food, no heat. 3 days now." You think about that as you walk. 50 people trapped in a metal box under a mountain of snow. You can't imagine the darkness, the panic, the smell. Historically, that's true. Multiple trains across the northeast were stranded mid-route during the blizzard, with passengers surviving off scraps and melted snow. Some people resorted to burning seat cushions for heat. One family, trapped for 2 days on a halted train, used their own luggage as firewood. It became so dangerous that people began refusing to board trains at all, even once the tracks were cleared. The fear stuck like frostbite. And there's something else odd you begin to notice. The quiet isn't just from the snow, it's from the absence of footsteps, of carriages, of anything. The city that never sleeps has for once passed out cold. Not unconscious, not dead, but in a strange suspended animation. Even the dogs are quiet. Even the birds are gone. Just you, your breath, and the shifting ice under your boots. Midtown's frozen heart is no longer beating, but you can almost hear it trying to. One cough here, a shovel scrape there, a door creaking open, life returning in fragments. You pass a man pulling a sled made from a door. It's piled high with coal and wood, some from his own walls, some scavenged from a collapsed shed. He nods to you like a fellow soldier. You nod back. On one corner, a group of children is using pot lids and trash can tops as makeshift sleds sliding down the icy slope of buried stairwell. They're laughing, the sound sharp and startling in the still air. You watch them for a moment, feeling something almost like joy poke its head through your exhaustion. But then one of them crashes, hard, and begins to cry. No adults rush over, just a pause, a collective wince, and then the game resumes. That's the mood now, a grim playfulness, tired jokes, people trying to stitch together normalcy from splinters. There's no help yet, no rescue parties, no government wagons rolling in with supplies, just this frozen ghost town humming faintly with stubborn human noise. There's a debate still about how deep those drifts actually got. Some say 20 feet. Others swear they climbed over 30 in certain places. The official record says the storm dumped 21 inches of snow on the city, but that doesn't account for the drifts formed by wind. Some say 40 feet, even 50 in alleys and between buildings. There's no consensus, only the memory of roofs vanishing beneath your boots. You return home as the weak sun dips behind the jagged skyline. Mrs. Riley's still there, pale but smiling faintly when she sees you. You give her the coal you bartered for and set to work restarting the fire. Midtown may be buried, but it's still breathing. So are you, for now. The strange thing about silence after a storm is how quickly it turns from comforting to unnerving. At first you welcomed it, no more howling wind, no glass or startling in the frame, no relentless thud of snow piling against your door. But now, the stillness settles over the city like a wool blanket left out in the snow, heavy, damp, and suffocating. You half expect to hear voices again, carriage wheels, maybe someone hawking oranges on the corner. But the streets have gone mute. It's not got peace, it's absence. You try to read to Mrs. Riley, something from a crinkled book she pulled from her coat pocket when she first came over. The pages smell like coal dust and rosewater. Your voice is hoarse, though, and the words come out sluggish and sour. She nods along, not really listening, her eyes closed, thin hands resting like folded paper in her lap. You stop after a while. What is there to read when the world outside has been erased? You step out mid-morning to survey the damage on your block again. The sky is slightly clearer today, a dim, colourless kind of bright. No blue, no sun, just a pale filter stretching across the sky like someone dusted the heavens in flour. You breathe it in. It tastes like cold brick and coal smoke. Today more neighbours have emerged. You spot a few familiar faces and even a waver to the butcher's apprentice, who gives you a 2 fingers salute while dragging a sed full of salted meat from God knows where. He's wrapped in so many layers he looks like a walking laundry sack. You wonder how many animals died in the stables behind his shop, and whether he's counting this haul as a blessing or a disaster. Maybe both. The city sounds different. Not louder, just weirder. The wind's still quiet, but now and then you hear the slow groan of wood under stress, the drip of melting snow where chimneys are still burning, and most unsettling of all, the occasional echo of footsteps. You never see the person, just the sound of them. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then gone. The snow absorbs it all so quickly, like it doesn't want you to know you're not alone. You head toward the main avenue, what used to be 6th or 7th, though now it's just a corridor of towering white hills, like the city has been folded in half. The deeper you go, the more you feel it. The true scale of what's happened. It's not just your street, or your neighbourhood, or even just Manhattan. This thing swallowed everything. You hear rumours now that parts of Boston are still unreachable. Trains to Albany? Gone. Philadelphia? Might as well be on the moon. A woman shouts across the drift, "Is the water working where you are?" And someone from a rooftop yells back that theirs froze 2 days ago. People start calling out updates like they're tossing messages in bottles. The bakery opened again. They dug out the school. A man died under the trolley on 11th. News travels by voice, passed hand to hand, eye to eye, with the urgency of gospel. One voice calls out, "Someone's playing music!" And you stop because yes, faintly, barely, you hear it. A violin maybe, a scratchy, wavering melody drifting from a window above a hat shop. It's slow and unsteady, but unmistakably real. You smile despite yourself. Somewhere in this white frozen graveyard, someone's bowing horsehair across string and making a tune. It's both absurd and necessary. And then, a new sound. A heavy crash in the distance, followed by a muffled scream. People freeze, heads turn, the scream doesn't come again, but the silence afterward feels tighter. You move in that direction, as do others. A small crowd gathers near a collapsed roof, what used to be a boarding house. Someone had been inside trying to dig out supplies from the attic. The wait finally won. They pull her out on a shutter. She's breathing barely, but her leg is bent in a way no leg should ever bend. No ambulance comes? Of course not. The horses are mostly dead. The roads are impassable. So a man with thick arms and soot-covered cheeks hoists her onto his back and starts trudging toward the church infirmary. He doesn't ask for help, he just goes. That's what Midtown has become now, an impromptu triage zone. No doctors, no orderlies, no system. Just volunteers, warm rooms, and whatever medicine people scrounge from broken shops. You pass a church where the nave is now a recovery ward, pews pushed aside, blankets spread across the stone floor. Some people are just sleeping, others aren't going to wake up. Here's your historical moment. This is one of the days when New York officially broke. When the illusion of control snapped clean in half. Telegraph wires, down. Elevated trains, paralysed. Fire stations, blocked in by walls of snow. In some cases, firefighters had to dig out of their own stations before responding to calls, and even when they could get out, water froze in the hoses mid-spray, turning to giant icicles before reaching the flames. You actually see one of those stations on your way back home. The doors are wide open, and the team inside looks like they've aged a decade. Blackened helmets, red, frost-bitten hands. One of them's thawing his boots over a small fire in a coal bucket. Another's hunched over a list of street names, trying to prioritise which buildings to check next. You hear one say, "They won't find all of them until spring." You walk past in silence. And then there are the oddities, the little things that defy logic. A man swears he saw a rat skating across an iced-over puddle like it was trained. Another claims his windows lit up blue just before the blizzard hit, a flicker of static in the air. One woman insists she heard voices in her walls. "The snow talks," she whispers to anyone who'll listen. People blame the cold, the hunger, the stress, but some of them sound sure. There's still debate, even now, about what was real and what was hysteria. Were some of the reported deaths really hypothermia? Or did people hallucinate themselves into danger? Did the frost make wood expand so much that houses buckled without warning? Or was it neglect? People argue about these things, but you're not thinking about debates today. You're just trying to survive them. You return home as twilight descends, not that you see the sun, just that everything gets dimmer. Mrs. Riley's asleep, snoring softly in her pile of blankets. You toss a few sticks into the stove and rub your hands over the fire until they tingle. That night, as you lie on the floor wrapped in everything you own, the quiet settles once again. You listen for the violin. It doesn't come. Instead, you hear your own heartbeat. Still going. The fourth morning of the storm's aftermath begins the way most bad mornings do, with a sound that doesn't belong. You're half asleep, wrapped in a stiff blanket that smells like old soup and smoke when it happens. A knock, then another, not loud, just enough to stir the air. At first, you think you imagined it, but then comes a voice, hoarse and muffled. "Milk run!" You sit bolt upright, spine cracking like dry kindling. You crawl to the window, still fogged and crusted at the corners, and push open a tiny flap you cleared the day before. Outside, the snow's no shorter, but something's changed. There's movement, not just scattered individuals, people. Men bundled in scarves, roped together at the waist like mountaineers. Some are hauling sleds stacked with small crates. Others carry buckets, baskets, bags. The street is still a frozen trench, but now it hums softly, with the shuffle of boots and the scrape of sled runners. It takes you a second to understand what's happening. People are delivering supplies. You throw on your coat, stumble through the front door, and nearly lose your footing on the ice-packed steps. The cold slaps your face like it's insulted you, but you don't care. You're following the sound of voices, the unmistakable rhythm of life pushing forward. The so-called milk run is a misnomer. It's not just milk. It's anything. Coal, potatoes, matches, salves, hard candy, newspapers from 3 days ago, and it's not a government operation either. It's a neighbourhood chain reaction. One family digs out a nearby cellar. They find 3 crates of canned goods. They call over the neighbours. The neighbours start a route. Then another joins, and another. Before long, there's a crude system, barter, not money. You offer whatever you have, candles, socks, a bottle of whiskey, a promise to come help dig out a roof tomorrow. Anything goes. You fall into line, one gloved hand gripping a rope that runs the length of the block. You pass it like a lifeline from person to person, each one nodding silently, faces chapped and red, eyes tired but alert. You help dig out a buried doorstep. You pass a bundle of newspapers to a man in a butcher's apron. You hold a ladder steady as a teenager climbs to clear an icy drain pipe. There's no loud talk, no laughter yet, just purpose, just motion. It's beautiful in its own frostbitten way. Along the route, you pass what remains of a streetcar, tilted to one side like a ship run aground. It's completely snowed under except for the curved iron tip of its roof and a little square window that's somehow still intact. You peer through it as you pass. Inside, it's dim, but you make out shapes. Bags, boots, something that might be a suitcase. And someone's coat, neatly folded on the bench. Whoever was here left in a hurry or never left at all. You keep moving. Farther down, a man standing on a drift like a preacher calling out names. Saw Elias on 12th. Little Jimmy's with him. A woman sobs right as they're in the snow. Someone puts an arm around her. The caller keeps going. Reverend Collier's house made it through. They've got hot water if you need it. The information rolls on like water over stones. People soak it up. You reach a corner and nearly step on something that makes your stomach twist. A hand, just the fingers, is reaching up from a mound of dirty snow like the person was trying to claw out before they froze. A group is already gathered nearby. Someone's calling for a crowbar. Another holds a lantern, low to the ground. No one screams. They just move quickly, with the precision of people who've seen too much in too short a time. You turn away. You don't look back. Back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for people to get buried alive in snowdrifts. Not just passed out in an alley and blanketed, buried. One man was found days later under a pile near City Hall, still standing upright, his hands in his pockets, preserved like a statue in a museum no one wanted to visit. They say the snow insulated him so well that it kept the body warm for hours after death. That kind of cold mercy was talked about with a weird reverence. Here's a fringe fact. A few families swore they heard knocking from beneath their floorboards during the storm. Not mice, not pipes. Knocking, like someone was underneath, trapped, calling out. No one could find the source. Some blamed ghosts. Others said the blizzard drove them mad. The truth? A few homes were built over old storage tunnels, and in rare cases, people did fall into them or climb in for shelter. Most were found. Some weren't. The scholarly debate around those tunnels still goes. Were they real or exaggerated? Some say they were used for bootlegging or even as hiding places during earlier panics. Others think they're the fever dreams of a city hallucinating from cold. But people remember what they remember, especially when they're scared. You keep moving. You pass a woman who's drawn a chalk sign on the wall of her building. Warm room, 2 hours per family. Below it, a crate full of shoes. You pause, spot a pair that look just your size. Your boots are soaked through. Your toes have gone from numb to stabbing, then back to numb again, a worrying sign. You make a quick trade, your last candle stub and a small jar of pickles, a fair exchange in this new world. You change boots right there in the snow. The new pair is too big but dry. You feel the heat returning to your feet within minutes. A quiet miracle. On the way back, You spot two men carrying a stretcher between them, makeshift, built from window shutters and tied with rope. A figure lies on it, swaddled in blankets. Maybe unconscious, maybe just asleep. No one asks. The men walk with quiet focus, not rushing, just keeping pace. You step aside for them and nod. They nod back. By midday, you're back on your block. The rope line is tighter now and anchored at more windows. Mrs. Riley's door has been cleared to shoulder height, and someone even left a small basket there. A gift of bread and a glass jar of lard. You don't know who, no note, just humanity, anonymous and grateful. You slip inside and find her awake. Her eyes light up when you hand her the bread. She tears it slowly, chewing with reverence like it's communion. You sit beside the stove and feel the stiffness in your bones. Your hands are shaking, but your heart isn't pounding anymore. Not from fear, just effort. That night the wind picks up again. Not a storm, just a whimper. A last breath from the blizzard as it drags itself across the country. You listen to it from your spot on the floor, eyes half closed. You think of the milk run, of the man shouting names, of the child's boot you saw near a buried stoop, and still the snow is everywhere. But now, so are you. By day 5, survival no longer feels heroic. It's just a job. A dull, grueling, repetitive job with no clear end and no payday. Except not dying. You wake to the usual numbness in your fingers, the usual sourness of your mouth, the usual routine. Check the fire, melt the snow, feed Mrs. Riley, bundle up. Each motion feels slower, heavier, like you're wading through something thicker than snow. Maybe exhaustion, maybe grief, maybe both. The fire burned low in the night, and the coals are barely smouldering now. You scrape the bottom of the coal bin and come up with dust and splinters. One more chunk of broken furniture goes into the stove, your last chair. You pause before feeding it to the flames, running your hand along its worn edge, remembering the creak it used to make when you read by the window. The fire doesn't care. It eats the wood with a sharp hiss. Outside, the city's still frozen, but it's changing. You can feel it, hear it, not just in the creak of shovels or the distant clang of iron, but in the voices. People are speaking again. Not yelling, not whispering, talking. Full sentences. Complaints mostly. Plans, predictions, jokes that don't quite land. Every once in a while, laughter. Real laughter. Like something broke loose inside them. You join another dig-out crew today. This time it's for the apothecary 3 blocks over. No one's seen old Mr. Prindle since the storm started, but his shop is buried beneath nearly 8 feet of wind-packed snow. You and 3 others, 2 men from an ironworks and a woman with arms like tree trunks, take turns clearing it out. The snow is heavier now, partially melted and refrozen, hard as plaster. Every shovelful feels like a sack of bricks. 2 hours in, you finally reach the door. It groans open with a thick crack. Inside, the air smells like mould and camphor. You push deeper, brushing snow off the shelves, and call out his name. Mr. Prindle? Nothing. You find him in the back room, propped against the counter with a quilt pulled to his chin. His eyes are closed, glasses resting on his chest, and one hand holding a bottle of laudanum. You touch his wrist, cold but peaceful. You close his fingers around the bottle again and step back. Later, when someone asks if he made it, you just say, "He passed warm and quiet." It feels like the right thing to say. It might even be true. The good news is, the shop is mostly intact. You inventory what's usable: salves, powders, smelling salts, vials of alcohol, dried herbs. A small miracle in labelled glass jars. By evening, most of it's distributed across the block. A few ounces go to the church infirmary, a handful to a new mother, who gave birth in her bathtub with the help of her teenage son. She's fine. The baby's fine. The story makes it to your ears by word of mouth, and you don't even mind that it's probably been exaggerated by 5 mouths in a row. The core of it is true, new life. In this. At one point you pass a man carving a hole in the side of a snowbank. You stop and ask what he's doing. He holds up a crooked sign, "Tavern open, bring your own bottle." He grins like he's just outsmarted the devil. And maybe he has. That night the Snow Tavern is lit by 2 lanterns and filled with clinking cups and low murmurs. It's absurd. It's dangerous. It's probably illegal. But people are there, huddled close in a cave of snow, passing around anything drinkable, whiskey, wine, vinegar, pretending to be wine, and telling stories like the world didn't almost end 2 days ago. You leave before it gets too rowdy, but not before taking a single sip of something sharp and peppery. You don't ask what it is, you just let the burn fill your chest for a few seconds and move on. In another part of town, You hear they've started naming the biggest drifts. One's called Mount Madison, another Little Brooklyn. A sarcastic cartographer has drawn a fake map on the side of a delivery cart labelling snowbanks like city boroughs, frozen flour, stovepipe ridge, socks for gloves alley. It's stupid and it's brilliant, and it makes people smile so it sticks. There's a debate now, an open one, argued at fire pits and across rooftops, about whether this is the worst winter anyone's ever seen. The older folks say it isn't. There was that one in Fifth, someone insists, worse cold, worse rats. Others disagree. But this one buried the city, another argues. You ever seen a city buried before? The scholars will argue about it for decades. Was 1888 the most destructive? Maybe not by volume, but by surprise, by force, by raw chaos. It's hard to top. And no one forgets what it felt like to hear the wind and know you couldn't call for help. That sticks. Here's something else not many talk about. The feeling of guilt that creeps in once the danger has passed. You survived, others didn't. You had enough coal, enough blankets, a neighbour to keep watch. Somewhere someone else had less, and they died for it. And now you're here, upright, while the snow still covers people whose names you'll never know. You carry that with you as you return home, arms full of salvaged supplies, a tin of ointment, a jar of pickled carrots, a candle stub, a chunk of hard sugar wrapped in wax paper. You lay them out like treasure. Mrs. Riley stirs from sleep and smiles weakly when you press a peppermint drop into her palm. "Where'd you get all this?" she asks, her voice like parchment. "Long story, you say. I'll tell you when the city thaws." She nods, eyes already drifting shut again. The candle flickers, casting a warm ripple across the room. You sit near the stove and peel off your gloves. Your fingers are cracked and red. Your shoulders ache. But your heart is still steady, still inert. And outside, in the still frozen silence, you swear you hear a bell. One chime, then it's gone. Somewhere between exhaustion and routine, you realise that Brooklyn may as well be another country. Before the storm, it was just across the East River, a ferry ride, quick crossing, practically a neighbour with a different accent. But now it's its own island, a frozen one, cut off by walls of ice, silence and geography. You haven't seen or heard anything from across the river since the storm began. Not a light, not a boat, not a shout carried on the wind, just snow, miles and miles of snow and uncertainty. Today you head east, not because you need anything in particular, but because the walk might help keep your joints from freezing solid. Your feet feel like bricks, and your coat smells like firewood and desperation. But the air is clearer than it's been all week. Cold, yes, but not biting. You can actually feel your breath again, see it rise in soft clouds instead of being ripped away by wind. The city around you is still a mess, but it's beginning to take on shape again. Shoveled paths twist through the snow like muddy veins. Chimneys puff grey signals of life. Kids have built fortresses from the drifts, arming themselves with frozen snowballs like they're preparing for battle. And in the distance, near the edge of the East River, you see smoke, not rising in chaos. No, steady, curling, organised. Someone's alive over there. You follow the tracks down to the riverfront. The docks are a disaster. Snow is stacked in bizarre shapes, caught in frozen swirls like whipped meringue dropped by a giant spoon. Ropes snap with frost as you pass, coiled like dead snakes around poles. The ferries? Still locked in place. You see 3 of them, noses pressed against the ice, cabins dark. One has a broken railing and what looks like a frozen footprint on its deck. But it's the river that stops you. The East River isn't a river anymore. It's a mirror, a field, a wide, shimmering sheet of ice stretching all the way to Brooklyn like someone ironed it flat. It reflects the sky with eerie precision, a pale grey copy of a pale grey world. You walk closer and see footprints on it. Human footprints. Dozens of them. Going both directions. People are walking across. You stare for a long time. A young man passes by, dragging a crate on a sled. "You going over?" he asks, voice muffled under a scarf. "I wasn't planning on it," you say. "Brooklyn's open," he says. "They've got bakeries firing again, church on the corners giving out soup. If you've got anything to trade, they'll take it." You glance back at the river. "Is it safe?" He just shrugs. Safer than starving. And with that, he keeps walking, right onto the ice, boots crunching, softly, disappearing into the fog that hangs low above the waterline. It's insane. It's reckless. It's tempting. A few others are gathering near the shore, debating the same thing. One man tosses a piece of wood onto the ice and watches it skid halfway across without cracking. A teenage girl walks out 20 feet, turns and waves like she's inviting you into a dream. No one falls, no one disappears, not yet. You hesitate, not out of fear, okay, maybe some fear, but mostly because there's still something kakuhrud about the river. It wasn't meant to be walked on, it was meant to be crossed by boat, like civilized people. Walking it feels like trespassing, like you're defying the city's rules in a way it won't forgive, and yet you step onto the edge, your boots crunch, and for a second you brace for the telltale crack of ice giving way, but nothing happens. You shift your weight. Still nothing. It holds, you take another step, then another, and suddenly you're walking across the East River. The experience is surreal. Beneath your feet the ice glows faintly, patches of white and blue streaked with frozen ridges and air bubbles. You try not to think about how deep the river is. You try not to think about who else might be down there, under the ice, never found. You just keep walking. Halfway across you stop and turn around. Manhattan looks like a painting, buildings jagged against the low sky, smoke rising like fading pencil strokes, covering everything in the same muted shade. It's beautiful, and terrible, and quiet. Brooklyn, when you reach it, feels like a different city. People are moving more. Paths have been cleared. There are actual fires burning outside, little barrel bonfires where neighbours gather to warm their hands. A group of men is trying to coax life into an old trolley with a crowbar and a bucket of sand, and children chase each other through narrow snow corridors. You even hear a harmonica playing somewhere behind a shuttered window. You find the church quickly, hard to miss with the line of people stretching around the corner. Inside, it smells like stew and sweat and pine oil. Volunteers move between makeshift tables, ladling out bowls of something warm and beige. You take one, settle into a pew, and sip carefully. It's bland and perfect. You end up talking to a man who swears Brooklyn handled it better. According to him, they organised faster, got the telegraph lines back up on their side quicker, rationed coal more wisely. We didn't wait for the city, he says, stabbing at his stew with a crust of bread. We became the city. It's a bold claim, and you're not sure it's true, but looking around, you see his point. There's more movement here, more plans, more people rebuilding than burying. Here's your historical fact for the day. Brooklyn really was more functional during the blizzard. The city, still independent from Manhattan at the time, had a better local response, partly due to fewer elevated railways and fewer top-heavy telegraph poles. Plus, its officials were quicker to coordinate relief efforts, with churches and local businesses stepping in to do what City Hall wasn't. Fringe fact, some Brooklynites claim the river froze from Manhattan out, as if the cold itself spread from the richer side of the city. A metaphor, maybe, or just salt in a very cold wound. There's debate over whether walking the East River was pure desperation or a display of New Yorker grit. People still argue over how safe it really was. Some historians suggest the ice was barely strong enough, and a slight rise in temperature could have swallowed dozens. Others believe the thick snow atop it helped insulate and distribute weight. Either way, it happened. Hundreds crossed, some with sleds, some with shoes tied in rags. One man reportedly pushed a piano across with the help of 4 friends. That one might be a stretch, but then again, it is Brooklyn. You don't stay long. As the sky begins to fade, you decide not to tempt fate with a nighttime return. The ice may hold, but moonlight plays tricks. You retrace your steps carefully, watching your feet, your breath visible in the air with every exhale. When you reach Manhattan's edge again, the wind has picked up slightly. It whistles low between the buildings, a reminder that the cold hasn't given up yet. Back home, Mrs. Riley is dozing with her mouth open. You tuck her in tighter, set down the small bag of rolls and lard you brought from the church, and sit by the stove. You crossed a river today, on foot, because that's what New Yorkers do when the world freezes. There's a heaviness in the air the next morning. Not just the weight of cold or snow, but something thicker. Grief, maybe. The kind that sinks into your bones before your brain even catches up. You feel it before you open your eyes. A sort of hush that doesn't belong. Even the creak of your own breath feels intrusive. Mrs. Riley isn't stirring. The fire's long gone to embers, and outside there's no wind, no chatter, no shoveling. Just a static quiet. Too still. You get up slowly, limbs stiff, everything sore. The first thing you do is check her. She's still alive, thank God. Pale, but breathing, her mouth slightly open, hands curled at her chest like a sleeping child's, you touch her wrist gently, more out of habit than anything. It's warm enough. You leave her be. There's no firewood left, not a single stick. The house is cold enough that your breath hovers in the room like fog, so you pull on your boots and go out to find something, anything that will burn. You're hoping for wood, sure, but you're willing to settle for boxes, cloth, maybe an abandoned chair missing a leg. You've become an expert at scanning a scene and measuring burn time in your head. That's what survival looks like now. You head south toward a part of the city you've avoided so far, closer to the river, where the buildings are older and the streets are narrower. The snow is worse there, less cleared, more wind-packed. You climb drifts like stairs, slide down the other side, using your shovel as a cane. Your hands are raw. The air stings with every breath. But what else are you going to do? Sit at home and freeze? It doesn't take long before you find your first body. He's lying just beneath the lip of a drift, as if he'd tried to crawl his way up and gave out halfway. No coat, just a sweater and scarf, both soaked stiff. You bend down, press 2 fingers to his neck, even though you already know. His skin is like marble. You don't know his name. You'll probably never know it. But you do what you can. You pull his scarf up over his face, whisper something quiet, something between a prayer and an apology, and keep walking. As you move on, you realise something unsettling. He's not the only one. You see another, slumped at the base of a boarded-up store. And then another, lying half-buried near the edge of a park bench, frozen in a lopsided snowbank. The storm didn't just inconvenience the city, it hunted it, quietly, thoroughly. And the worst part? Most people don't know. Not really. Everyone's too busy digging, feeding, warming, surviving to stop and look around. But you see it now, the cost. Not in headlines, not in numbers, in bodies. You helped dig one out later that day. A man named Thomas. Someone recognised him. Lived 2 streets over, father of 3, worked on the trolley line. Got caught trying to check on his sister in the Bronx. Never made it past Midtown. You help lift him onto a makeshift sled, a window shutter roped at the corners, and pull him to the church down the block. There's a stack of bodies behind it now, covered in tarps, waiting for identification. Or spring. That's the part nobody tells you. Snow preserves. It doesn't rot, it just holds. And in doing so, it makes the dead wait. There's something horrifying about that. The idea that the city has paused, not just for the living, but for the dead, too. A cold limbo. You keep your head down and your feet moving. You find a few usable things, a crate full of packing straw, a broken table leg, some half-burned books in a ruined bookstore. You carry them back under your arm like trophies. On the way, you pass a woman wrapped in a fur coat too fine for this part of town. She's pacing in front of a half-dug doorway, muttering names to herself. One of them might be yours for all you know. You don't stop, you don't have it in you today. Here's your historical nugget. During the blizzard of 1888, over 200 people died in New York City alone. Most of them weren't crushed or stranded. They froze quietly, sometimes within a block of help. Some estimates say the true number is higher, that many weren't found until the thaw. Others say whole families were lost in tenements where the pipes burst and no one came to check on them. Here's your fringe fact. There's at least one account of a man buried alive in a snowdrift, surviving for 2 days because he had a flask of brandy, a book, and most importantly, a pocket of air. He was pulled out delirious, talking to someone who wasn't there, and swore he saw a white lady guarding him in the dark. Legend? Probably. But no one who heard it doubted him. Scholars still argue over how many perished and whether more could have been saved if the city had been prepared. Maybe if the warnings had been louder. Maybe if the elevated trains had been shut down early. Maybe if people hadn't underestimated March. But what do numbers matter when you've seen faces? You get back just as the sun dips. What little of it exists behind the low clouds. Mrs. Riley's awake, her cheeks tinged with pink. You tell her the good news. More wood, a little food, and someone's handing out candles at the old butcher shop. You lie and say the streets are getting better. You lie and say the city's coming back to life. Because what else can you do? You light a fire, gently feed it 1 book at a time, starting with a water-damaged almanac that no longer knows the year. The warmth crawls back into the room inch by inch. You listen to the crackle, you breathe deep, you feel the chair leg catch and burn hot. That night you dream of the river again. Only this time, it's not frozen. It's open, black and wide. You're rowing across it with no oars, no boat, just a chair and 2 books keeping you afloat. You wake with sweat on your neck and the fire down to coals again, but you're alive. And sometimes, in this city, that's still enough. You wake to a knock, not the eerie kind like before. This one's sharp, regular, human, real. You sit up, squinting toward the door, heart already racing in that half-panicked way it does now, whenever something breaks the routine. Another knock. "Mail," a voice says through the crack. "Anyone alive in there?" You scramble up, boots thudding over the floorboards. When you swing open the door, the cold hits you like a slap to the face, but there's someone standing there, actually standing in a blue coat, snow-caked to the elbows, sack over one shoulder, and a stack of papers in one gloved hand. "I've got letters," he says, like this is just another Tuesday. "You all right in there?" You blink, unsure if you're hallucinating, but he's real. And you laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's the last thing you expected. A mail carrier making his rounds in the aftermath of a biblical storm like nothing happened. "God, you're serious," you say. "More or less," he replies with a lopsided grin, pulling a few envelopes from the stack. "I've been on foot since the storm ended. No horses, no carts, just boots and nerves. They're calling me a hero back at the post office, but I'm pretty sure I'm just insane." He hands you 2 letters, one addressed to a man who froze 3 doors down, the other to your own name. You take them both, not knowing what to do with the first, not sure you want to open the second. The mailman tips his hat and moves on, disappearing into the drift like a mirage in wool. You go back inside, holding the envelope like it might melt in your hands. It's from your sister, dated a week before the storm. Her neat handwriting is still sharp through the frost-cracked paper. You read it slowly, lips moving silently, soaking in her concern for the weather, her updates about the children, her promise to visit in spring. You don't cry. Not really. Just sit there for a while, letting the heat from the stove crawl back into your bones, letter folded neatly in your lap like a small warm stone. Outside, the mail run continues. They're calling them letter crawls now. Postal workers trudging through shoulder-high drifts, some with sleds, some with nothing but determination. Not all of them make it to every door, but enough of them do that it matters. The city somehow still believes in the mail. That's the thing about New York. It doesn't die quietly. Even buried under 40-foot drifts, it finds a way to move. It reanimates one piece at a time. Postal workers, bakers, neighbours turning their parlours into clinics. It doesn't ask for permission, just picks itself up. You hear that one of the old train stations is finally opening. Just one track, just one direction. A locomotive has been hacked free with axes and fire, and they're planning a test run tomorrow. People are already lining up for tickets. No one cares where the train's going, just that it's moving. Another rumour spreads. A group of boys dug a tunnel between rooftops down in the Bowery, turning a 5-block span into an unofficial highway. They've marked the route with chalk and hand-painted arrows. Someone's dubbed it the Snowline Express. You laugh when you hear it, not because it's clever, but because it's true. The city's building paths wherever it can. Not just physical ones, emotional ones too. You feel it in the way people nod now instead of passing silently. In the way they share food without being asked. In the way the guy who used to curse at the corner lamppost now takes breaks to check on the widow in the building next door. You wander out later, mostly for firewood, but also to stretch your legs. You find a few boards from a collapsed balcony and drag them home tied with twine. On the way, you run into the letter carrier again. He's seated on a stoop this time, rubbing his feet. His socks are steaming on a stick he's propped over a tiny can fire. "Want a story?" he asks without looking up. You sit beside him and nod. "There's a woman in Tribeca who's still delivering milk," he says. Keeps her cows inside her parlour, 2 of them, broke down her front windows to get them in. She churns butter in the morning and sells it door to door by sled. Her front room smells like a barn, but she says she'd rather have stink than freeze. You chuckle, mostly from the image. That true? Maybe. Who cares? He shrugs. Feels true. That's the new logic in town. If it feels true, that's good enough. No one has time to fact-check. No one has the energy for proof. If it keeps people warm or moving or hopeful, let it ride. Here's a quirky bit of history for you. During the blizzard of 1888, mailmen were celebrated as national heroes. Newspapers wrote profiles of the ones who slogged through snowdrifts to bring letters, packages, even bills, anything to maintain normalcy. One man supposedly walked 20 miles in 2 days, refusing to rest until every letter had been delivered. He collapsed outside the last address, letter still clenched in his fist. Legend or truth? Hard to say, but people believed it. And belief was everything. Some fringe accounts say the post office issued extra rations of whiskey to carriers for warmth, which might explain why some letters ended up delivered to the wrong buildings, or to barns in one case. There's even a disputed story about a carrier who sledded from Queens to Manhattan with mail tied to his dog's back. The dog's name was Buster. The story is probably nonsense, but Buster still shows up in local folklore. You and the letter carrier part ways with a nod. No formal goodbye, just the knowledge that you'll both keep moving. That's enough. Back home, you chop the balcony boards into pieces small enough for the stove. Mrs. Riley watches from the corner, sipping broth from a chipped mug. "You had to hear the mails running?" she asks. "I did." "Someone should tell the mayor." "Doubt they can find him," you say, and she smiles. It's the first time in days you've seen her really smile. You stash the rest of the wood, toss a chunk into the fire, and let it roar. That night, you sit by the light of a single candle and write a reply to your sister. You don't say everything, just enough. You tell her you're alive, the city's still standing, and that sometimes, even when the world freezes over, the mail still finds a way. You sign it, fold it, and leave it near the door. You'll know when it's time to send it. By now, the railroads are less transportation and more myth. People talk about them like sunken ships, buried somewhere out there in the snow, frozen mid-journey, with passengers still sitting upright, waiting for motion that never comes. For days you've heard whispers about stranded trains, whole cars stuck outside the city limits, cut off and encased like snow globes full of helplessness. Some people scoff at the stories, others nod solemnly, like they've seen one with their own eyes. You don't know who's right, but this morning you finally see it for yourself. Word comes from a scavenger, a boy with 2 different boots and a canvas bag full of buttons and wire. He says a train's been spotted near the rail yard, half dug out, passengers still inside. "They're alive?" you ask. He just shrugs. "Some." Then he's gone, off to trade buttons for biscuits. You don't hesitate. You grab your scarf, tie on your boots, and start walking. The snow has hardened overnight, frozen crust over powder. You walk on top of it now instead of through, which makes the trip faster but slipperier. Your shovel thumps against your back with every step. You don't even mind. It feels good to have a purpose again, something solid and real to move toward. The rail yard isn't far, maybe a mile, but it might as well be 20. You pass a dozen people digging out stoops, windows, even animals. One man is standing on a frozen cow, trying to pry it free with a broom handle. Another is yelling at the sky, furious that the sun has the nerve to be this useless. You don't stop. You just keep following the curve of the tracks until you see it. A plume of smoke, faint but visible, rising through the frost like hope. The train is not what you expected. You thought it'd be majestic, tragic, some iron beast frozen in a noble pose. Instead, it looks tired, hunched. The engine is tilted to one side like it tried to muscle through a drift and gave up halfway. Snow coats the windows, thick as paste. One door is jammed open, its steps buried in ice. A makeshift path has been dug from the yard to the rear car, where a cluster of people stands huddled around a barrel fire. You approach slowly, unsure of your role here. One woman turns and gives you a weary nod. She's wrapped in 3 different shawls and wears a conductor's cap far too big for her. "You from the city?" she asks. "Yes." You nod. She sighs like she's been holding it for 3 days. "Took you long enough?" You help where you can. They've been stuck here since the storm hit. Motionless, stranded between stops, no food after day 1. Heat gone by day 2. The conductor froze trying to walk for help, and his body's still curled in the snow a quarter-mile down the tracks. They keep their distance from it. "Out of respect," one man says, which you know is code for, "we couldn't bear to move him." Inside the train, the smell hits you first. Cold sweat, breath, damp wool, and a metallic stink like rusted air. People lie curled across the benches, bundled in coats, some holding hands, some whispering prayers. One woman has a child in her lap, face pressed to her chest. You can't tell if the child is asleep or not. You don't ask. You help pass out water, melted snow from a nearby fire, and a few crusts of bread that someone brought from the city. It's not enough. Nothing is, but it's something. And in the aftershock of a disaster, something carries weight. Someone mentions a baby was born in the 3rd car 2 nights ago, a girl. They wrapped her in scarves and mittens, kept her tucked close between passengers to preserve heat. She made it. barely. Her name's Grace, and her father insists she's going to grow up tough as nails. The others laugh, but it's soft, careful laughter, like the baby might hear it and demand silence. You sit with them for a while. No one talks much. You just listen. Stories rise up here and there. How they rationed the last crackers. How one woman sang lullabies until her voice gave out. How they voted against lighting a fire at first because the smoke might look like weakness. You stare at the snow through the windows and wonder if that's how cities die. Not with collapse, but with quiet decisions made by cold people in colder rooms. Eventually, you help lead the first group back to the edge of the city. 5 people able to walk, carrying 2 who aren't. You walk the tracks with them, holding the rope they've tied around each other, making sure no one falls behind. One man stops mid-step and vomits. Another slips and cracks his shin on the rail. No one panics. They just keep going, one shaky step after another. When you get back to the edge of town, people gather silently. Blankets are offered. Fire barrels stoked. A woman offers hot broth in a tin cup, but no speeches. Just actions. The rescue continues through the afternoon. More trips, more survivors. Not all of them make it. One woman dies 2 feet from the church steps. Another sits down halfway and simply doesn't get back up. She was talking 1 minute, someone says, then gone. Here's your historical fact. In reality, several trains were stranded during the blizzards of 1888, on elevated lines, in tunnels, and especially in rural areas. Some passengers went without food or heat for up to 3 days. A few tried to escape on foot, only to collapse and be buried by drifts. It was one of the great failures of the city's infrastructure. Trains that couldn't run, tracks that couldn't be cleared, lives lost for lack of planning. And here's your fringe fact. One conductor swore that when he left the train to find help, the snow whispered to him. Not in words, but in pulses, like breathing, like it was watching. He said it led him in circles until he gave up and crawled back to the train, hands bleeding, eyes half blind. He lived, but he never worked the rails again. You make your final trip just as dusk falls. The last passenger, an elderly man with frostbite up to his knees, has been silent the whole time. You carry him on a sled, the rope digging into your palms, your legs screaming from the cold, but you don't stop. Not now. When you finally pull him into the infirmary, he looks up at you and says, "Did we make it?" And you nod, even though you're not sure what he means. Back home, you collapse near the stove. You barely have the energy to untie your boots. Your coat stays on. You stare at the fire, hands trembling. Mrs. Riley watches you for a moment, then reaches over and places her hand on yours. You don't speak, you just sit there, 2 survivors, watching the fire do its best. You know things have truly gone sideways when the rich start showing up at the same soup lines as everyone else. The first time you see it, you don't even recognise the man, not until someone nudges you and whispers, "That's Mr. Langston. Langston Shipping, owns half the docks." He's standing 5 people ahead of you in line, hands stuffed into elegant leather gloves, fur collar streaked with soot. He's staring at the ground like it personally insulted him. His boots are polished, still gleaming, but his eyes look like the rest of yours. Tired, hollowed out, red-rimmed from cold and grief. The soup comes in cracked bowls, ladled out by a woman who used to teach piano and now runs a wood stove like it's a command centre. She doesn't treat Langston any different than she treats you, just slaps the bowl into his hands and says, "Don't spill it, you'll regret that." He nods and shuffles off like a man who's never waited for anything in his life and now doesn't trust the ground under him. You sip your own bowl slowly. It's mostly hot water with a few carrot shavings and maybe a sliver of potato. But it's hot, and it's food. And no one's asking how much money you have or what your last name is, or what kind of life you lived before the snow fell like judgment. You finish your soup and wander uptown. You're curious mostly, wanting to see how the other half is coping. You pass rows of elegant brownstones, many of them buried to the second floor. Some have been shoveled clear, paths carved out by teams of servants or the neighbours, or more often than not, the owners themselves, now reduced to digging with silver-plated fireplace shovels and tea trays. One man is clearing snow with a golf club, another uses a piano bench. You don't offer help. They'd probably wave you off anyway, pride still standing taller than the snowdrifts. You hear stories as you go. A family on Madison Avenue ran out of coal and started burning their dining chairs. The girl who used to sit on the stoop in silks and pearls now wears her mother's coats. two at a time, her fingers wrapped in velvet napkins. At one mansion, the glass conservatory collapsed under the weight of the snow, killing their prize parrot and two houseplants with names. The owners haven't stopped crying, not because of the parrot, because they realised they weren't immune. Here's what no one tells you about the blizzard. It didn't care how big your house was or how much silver you kept in your drawers. It buried the rich and poor alike. It iced over investments. It froze bank vaults shut. And for a brief shining moment, everyone was equal under the snow. Everyone had to shovel, everyone had to ration. Everyone had to figure out how to make a fire without someone doing it for them. You pass a once grand townhouse where someone's used a broken chandelier to hang wet socks near the fire. Inside, three well-dressed women are wrapped in tablecloths, sitting in a circle, playing cards by candlelight. One of them sees you and lifts her glass, likely filled with melted snow and vinegar pretending to be wine. She says, "Care to join?" You smile politely and keep walking. Down the block you see a man arguing with his driver. The carriage is half submerged in a snowbank, the horse is long gone. The driver's demanding his wages. The man is insisting the blizzard was an act of God, and therefore not part of the employment agreement. The driver laughs bitterly and walks off. The man is left standing alone in his fur coat, muttering to no one. You shake your head. Even now, some of them still don't get it. Later, you pass the old opera house. Its roof caved in yesterday, taking most of the upper balcony with it. No one was inside, shows had stopped days before the storm, but the damage is permanent. A hole yawns in the ceiling like a mouthful of broken teeth. Snowdrifts spill into the aisles, and icicles hang from the chandeliers. You hear someone call it Mother Nature's encore. You don't laugh. There's a sense as you walk that the city is being reshaped, not just physically but socially. The lines have blurred. The caste system has cracked. You see dock workers sitting shoulder to shoulder with bankers around makeshift fires. Nannies sharing sardines with stockbrokers. Everyone wrapped in the same patchwork of blankets and desperation. Here's your historical fact. During the blizzard of 1888, the city's elite were hit harder than they expected. Accustomed to privilege and service, many were unprepared for the sudden halt in transportation, heat and food. The mansions uptown became just as cold as the tenements downtown, and with no servants able to report for duty, the wealthy were forced to fend for themselves. Some did, others didn't. Fringe detail, one of the wealthiest men in New York, name lost to time, though some say it was a cousin of the Roosevelts, reportedly tried to bribe a group of newsboys to dig out his front gate. He offered them gold coins. They laughed, took his whiskey instead, and sledded down his snow-covered front steps. It took him 2 more days to get out, using a sterling silver tray as a shovel. True, hard to say, but the image lingers. Scholars debate whether this temporary flattening of the social hierarchy had any long-term effect. Did it make the city more equitable? Did it awaken compassion in the privileged? The general consensus is, not really. Once the thaw came, so did the old systems. But for a few days in March, money couldn't buy heat or food or an escape. And in that brief window, something radical happened. People saw each other. You head back home with a small bundle of firewood and a half loaf of dense, dark bread traded from a woman whose husband used to own a string of hotels. Now she sells tea from her window for 2 buttons and a song. You didn't have buttons. You whistled. When you return, Mrs. Riley is awake and alert, wrapped in her usual bundle of shawls and quilts like a queen surveying her court. You hand her the bread, and she breaks it with careful fingers. "Smells like rye," she says. "Tastes like cardboard," you reply. She grins. "You bring me anything else, or just bitterness and crumbs?" "Perspective," you say, lighting the stove. "I bring you that." She nods solemnly. "That's harder to burn." You sit beside her as the fire catches. The warmth slowly fills the room, mingling with the fading light of day. Outside somewhere, a rich man's hand aches from his first blister. A banker's shoes are wet. The heiress's pearls are hanging by a window to dry. And for one more night, in the heart of this frozen city, everyone is just cold. Equally, deeply, beautifully cold. There are fires burning in the distance, and not the kind that keep you warm. You smell it first, that awful, unmistakable mix of smoke, charred wood, and something deeper. Chemical, sharp. It creeps into your nostrils before you even realise what it means. You're halfway through melting snow for tea when someone bangs on the door, yelling down the street, "Fire! Warehouse district! Ah!" Then they're gone again, voice trailing off into the cold. You don't need to be told twice to ye. You shove your boots on, grab your coat and run. Riley calls after you. Something between a warning and a prayer, but your blood's already racing. A fire in this city, in this cold, is a death sentence unless someone acts fast. By the time you get there, the sky is already thick with smoke. It billows like a dark ghost between buildings, curling against the snow like it wants to claw its way back into the earth. The warehouse, it's an old textile storage facility, is half collapsed, flames licking out from shattered windows. A crowd's already forming, not gawking, not standing around, working. Buckets pass from hand to hand in a frantic, jerky rhythm. Someone's trying to dig out the hydrant, another shouting for axes. The problem is, the hoses are frozen solid. The pumps, the water mains, useless. It's all just stiff lines of ice coiled like ropes. You grab a bucket and fall into the chain without thinking. The water's lukewarm at best, and most of it sloshes out before you even get near the flames. It's like trying to put out hell with a teacup. Still, everyone keeps going, because what else can you do? You see a man hurl his entire coat onto the fire, screaming like it owes him money. It does nothing. The wind picks up, flaring the flames into hungry tendrils. Here's the cruel truth about a winter fire. It doesn't just burn, it spreads, jumping across rooftops with eerie speed, turning ice into steam and snow into black slush. Worse still, the fire crews, what's left of them, are doing everything they can, but they're running out of tools. Their ladders are frozen, their wagons stuck, their boots are brittle. They swing axes at walls as if that will scare the blaze into submission. You see one firefighter, barely 20, staggering backward with a hose in his hands. The water inside froze mid-spray, a snake of ice hanging from the nozzle like a glass sculpture. He throws it down in frustration, kicks at the snow, then collapses to his knees, coughing into his scarf. Then the unthinkable happens. A man stumbles out from inside the warehouse, clothes smoking, beard singed, one arm dragging uselessly behind him. For a moment everyone freezes. You think, how is anyone even in there? Then he collapses, an instinct kicks in. 2 people rush forward and drag him clear. He's barely breathing. You recognise the look. Half dead, maybe more. They wrap him in blankets and carry him to the church infirmary. You don't follow. You can't. You're still holding the bucket. Someone screams from the next building over. The flames have jumped. The snow on the rooftop melted just enough to make room for fire to catch the wooden supports beneath. It lights up like it was waiting. You hear glass shatter. People shout for the family that lives upstairs. And this is where it gets hard, because not everyone can be saved. The firefighters try to reach the building, but the path is too narrow, the drift's too deep. Someone suggests tunnelling in through the alley, but the snow is frozen solid, packed like cement. You hear the mother's voice from inside, calling for her child. Then another crash, wood splitting, something caving in. Then silence. Someone, maybe you, throws their bucket into the fire and screams. You all keep going, but your arms are getting heavier, and the wind is shifting. It's pushing the smoke back toward the crowd. Eyes start to burn. People cough. Some fall back. You stay as long as you can until your legs threaten to give out. Then you stumble away, dizzy, hands black with soot and cold. Here's your historical fact. During the blizzard of 1888, fires were one of the deadliest secondary effects. With most water mains frozen and hydrants buried, firefighters had no reliable way to fight blazes. Some crews resorted to chopping through ponds or carrying water by hand from melted snow. The wind often whipped fires into a frenzy, and in at least 3 documented cases, entire blocks were lost, not to snow, but to flame. Fringe detail, one fire captain wrote in his journal that he watched water from his hose freeze mid-air, a ribbon of ice forming as if time itself had stopped it. Others claimed their coats caught fire while their boots stayed frozen. A few stories, uncorroborated, mention people trying to smother fires with snow, only to have the steam scald their lungs. There's debate about whether those stories are exaggerated, but not about the deaths. You trudge back to your street just as dusk begins to settle. The warehouse is mostly gone now, just a shrieking skeleton of iron beams and blackened snow. You don't look back. You can't. Your breath rattles in your throat. Your muscles twitch from strain. Your brain keeps replaying that mother's voice. At home, Mrs. Riley watches you from her blanket throne. She doesn't ask. Just reads your face and nods once sadly. You collapse near the stove and dump your coat in a heap. The fire's still going, barely. You feed it one piece of scavenged wood, and it crackles like bones snapping. You sit in the dark for a long time, no candle. No words, just the warmth on your skin and the memory of heat that wasn't yours. When you finally speak, your voice is low, cracked. We couldn't save them. Mrs. Riley puts her hand over yours. No, she says, but you tried. Outside, the wind kicks up again, whistling around corners like it's searching for something. But tonight, the city doesn't howl back. It just smoulders. The next morning, the snow glows like glass. Not the soft, white powder you remember from before the storm, but ice now, everywhere. A shining, slick sheen coats the streets, rooftops, trees, even the long-dead horses frozen mid-step. You step outside and nearly go flat on your back. Your boots skid, arms flail, and you catch yourself on the frame of the door just in time. You glance around, hoping no one saw, but people aren't watching. They're too busy trying to walk without dying, and in the middle of it all, of course, it's the kids who are thriving. You see them the second you round the corner. A pack of them, bundled up in patched coats and tied together scarves, hooting and hollering like they've been given the keys to the kingdom. They've taken over the steep hill behind the old courthouse, now nothing but an icy slope, and turned it into what might be the most dangerous sledding track in New York history. It's chaos. Controlled kind of, but chaos. Rusty wash basin lids, stove doors, wooden planks, broken shutters, anything even vaguely sled-shaped is fair game. You watch one boy, no older than 9, launch himself down the slope on what looks like a church kneeler. He zips past a lantern post, skids over a frozen trash heap, and only wipes out when he smashes into a drift with a laugh so loud it echoes off the buildings. Another follows on a barrel lid, spinning like a coin before tumbling sideways into a snowbank. 2 more go down as a pair, clinging to opposite ends of a busted ironing board. They are calling it Dead Man's Drop. Of course they are. A group of older kids stands near the top of the hill taking bets, shouting out odds like little Wall Street brokers. 2 cents says he clears the barrel. 5 cents on the kid with the red scarf. You don't even ask where they're getting money, probably just scraps of metal and buttons at this point. One girl, tall, wild-eyed, maybe 12, wipes a snotty nose on her sleeve and gestures to you. Hey, you look like you've got good knees, want to try? You raise a hand and shake your head, smiling. Only knees I've got, kid. Suit yourself, she shrugs, then turns and hurls herself downhill on a piece of lathe tied to 2 curtain rods. She disappears behind a drift. A second later, a triumphant yell, "Still alive!" You laugh despite yourself. Here's what no one tells you about disaster. Kids adapt faster than adults. They don't carry the same weight of memory or expectation. They're not haunted by the before. They don't think about taxes or infrastructure or the fact that there's still a body frozen under the trolley stop. They just see a hill, some ice, and a challenge. You're not sure if it's bravery or denial. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's survival. You walk closer and chat with one of the older boys, maybe 15, scarf wound tight around his jaw like a bandit. He tells you they've been sledding for 2 days straight. Started with 5 of us, now there's 30, he gestures down the hill. We had a dog team at one point, didn't last. One of them ran off with a roast chicken. You ask where they sleep. He shrugs. Most of us go home when it gets dark, some don't. We built a fort over on 9th. Got 3 walls and a roof, sorta. Later you see it. It's made of snow, sure, but also bricks, door frames, and at least 1 piano. Someone's rigged a stovepipe through a hole in the back. You spot smoke, you ask what's cooking. A kid named Toby says canned peaches and newspaper stew. You ask what that is. He hands you a mug. You don't ask again. Historical fact. During the blizzard of 1888, kids ruled the streets. With schools closed indefinitely and most parents too busy surviving to babysit, the city's children took to the snow like pirates. Sledding down drifts, building tunnels between homes, delivering coal, scamming travellers. Some made money helping dig out storefronts. Others sold warm bricks to cold feet for a nickel a pop. They weren't just surviving, they were working it. Fringe fact? There's a story repeated enough to be suspicious about a group of street kids who fashioned an actual sleigh from an old coffin and used it to ferry bread and milk across Manhattan. People called them the Ghost Gang. They'd appear in the fog, drop supplies at doors, and vanish. Some say they wore masks, others say they didn't exist at all, but multiple eyewitnesses swear they saw that coffin on skids flying down Broadway like a bat out of hell. There's some debate about how much truth to assign to those tales. But what's undeniable is that the children of the storm found a way to own it. They built a city inside the city, one without rules, one where getting frostbite was just part of the game. You spend most of the day near the hill, helping one kid bandage up a twisted ankle with cloth and string, another calm down after a rough crash. No one cries. Well, they do, but only briefly. There's no space for it to linger. They slap snow on their bruises, crack jokes, and go again. They move on. You find yourself oddly grateful for them, for their defiance, their refusal to be subdued, for the way they scream into the wind like it hasn't won yet. You head home as dusk crawls in again. Your boots crunch with every step, the ice beneath them a chorus of creaks and snaps. You pass the hill one last time and see 3 kids forming a conga line of sleds, tied together with twine and belts. One yells, "Full speed ahead!" and that they push off into the twilight, disappearing with a roar of laughter. Back at the house, Mrs. Riley's awake. You tell her about the sledding hill, the coffin sled, the peach and newspaper stew. She grins. "Kids will survive the apocalypse. Always do." "Think they'll remember this?" you ask. "Oh, sure," she says, settling deeper into her pile of blankets. "They'll tell their kids about it one day. Back in '88, we slid down buildings, we tunneled through the city, we lived on nothing but soup and nerve. They'll remember." You light the fire, and for a moment, the image lingers. Decades from now, a grey-haired woman telling her grandchildren how she once rode a piano bench down a 20-foot drift. The thought warms you more than the fire. Outside, the stars are faint, but for once you can see them. You never thought you'd be the kind of person to walk across a frozen river more than once, but here you are. Boots crunching over the glass, breath puffing in the air, a rope tied around your waist just in case the ice decides it's had enough of your weight. You'd laughed at the idea before. The river was a border, a line, a living thing. Now it's a hallway, a path, the most direct route from Manhattan to Brooklyn, and people are using it like a sidewalk. Today, it's not just the brave or the desperate making the crossing, it's everyone. Workers in patched coats, mothers with bundled infants, teenagers dragging crates of supplies on battered sleds. A man skates past you on a pair of handmade blades strapped to his shoes, what look like repurposed butcher knives bolted to leather soles. You glance down at your boots and suddenly feel very underdressed. The river is quiet, oddly so. No splashing, no groaning water beneath, just the faint whistle of wind and the rhythmic scrape of hundreds of footsteps moving in the same direction. You look back at Manhattan, its rooftops hunched under snow, chimneys sighing black into the sky, and then forward to Brooklyn, where plumes of steam mark bakeries slowly coming back to life. You pass a group kneeling near a crack in the ice, not panicked but focused. One of them points down and says, "See that? That's the East River underneath us." You peer over his shoulder and see it, sluggish, dark, alive. It sloshes just inches beneath the surface like a monster with nowhere to go. You step back quickly, suddenly aware of your own heartbeat. "Don't worry," someone says. "They say the ice is over a foot thick now." You nod, but you don't stop holding your breath until your boots hit the Brooklyn shore. This time the streets are busier. News has travelled. People know Brooklyn's thawing faster, moving faster, thinking ahead. You walk up the main road and see teams of neighbours clearing snow with surprising coordination. Someone's chopped out a full trench along the sidewalk, complete with carved handholds and snow stairs. The corner grocer is open again, window cracked just wide enough for a loaf to be passed through, in exchange for whatever coin, scrap or favour is on offer. He's got a sign hanging above the door. "We accept buttons, no checks." You trade a sewing kit for a sack of oats and 2 jars of pickled beets. The grocer tosses in a packet of dried lavender, to make your place smell less like old shoes. You can't even pretend to be offended. He's not wrong. You make your way to a nearby Lutheran church that's become a hub for cross-river information. Inside, it's warm and echoey, with benches crammed full of bundled people. A priest with his sleeves rolled up directs traffic like a general, sending one man to fetch coal, another to help deliver soup. You catch snippets of news between footfalls. They're clearing the Brooklyn Bridge, but it'll be weeks before carriages can cross. Queens got hit worse than we thought. Half the telegraph poles snapped clean. I heard Boston's still iced in. Philadelphia, too. New Haven just got word out. 38 dead in the city, more in the hills. Manhattan's digging out, but it'll take another storm to melt this mess. There's no central authority here. No government presence. Just people gathering, sharing, surviving. You post a note on the makeshift message board near the back of the church. Alive, Lower Manhattan. Warming station on Eldridge, room for 1 to who. Below it are dozens more. Some are notes of hope, some are desperate. Some are just names with no further explanation. You wonder which ones will never be read. And then you see her, a woman pacing just outside the chapel, cheeks windburned, hair tied back, gloves missing. She's holding a hand-drawn map and sobbing. "He crossed yesterday," she says to no one in particular. "He said he'd only be an hour. He hasn't come back." You recognise the look in her eyes. It's the same one you've seen in mirrors since the storm began. Fear hollowed out by exhaustion. You don't say anything. You can't. You simply walk past her into the cold again and try not to look at the river on your way back. Here's your historical fact. During the blizzard, the East River froze thick enough that thousands of people crossed it on foot, many dragging carts and even livestock behind them. It wasn't just a novelty, it was a lifeline. With ferries locked in ice and bridges unusable, the river became the city's coldest road. Some businesses encouraged employees to make the crossing if they were young, healthy and stupid enough to try it. Fringe fact, one man reportedly pushed a piano across the river, claiming he refused to let the blizzard silence music. The piano made it, though barely. The leg snapped just as he reached Brooklyn, and the whole thing slid across the final stretch with a sound like thunder. For weeks afterward, people said they could still hear ghost notes echoing across the ice. Romantic nonsense? Sure, but it made the papers. There's some scholarly debate over just how stable the ice was and how many crossings were truly safe. A few did fall through, most didn't, but the image of thousands of New Yorkers walking over a frozen river, arms full of supplies, hearts full of uncertainty, is as bizarre as it is poetic. It was a moment when the city was both divided and unified at once. You crossed back near sunset, arms full of supplies, pockets full of traded trinkets. The sky is streaked with orange and purple, the sun finally punching through in thin golden slashes. It's almost beautiful. Almost. Halfway across you stop and look down. Beneath your feet the dark river moves in slow churns. The ice groans faintly. You kneel and touch it. Just once. It's solid. Cold. Honest. You make it back to Manhattan as the light fades. People are gathered at the corner, passing news about a train finally arriving in Jersey. A coal shipment may come through tomorrow. The baker down the street is planning to reopen. Someone says the mayor's finally surfaced. No one really cares. You step inside, unload your bundle and shake the frost from your coat. Mrs. Riley eyes the beats with suspicion, but says nothing. She's knitting again, one finger still wrapped in gauze. Her scarf looks cleaner than before. You realise someone must have washed it while you were gone. "How was the crossing?" she asks. "Solid," you say, "but I wouldn't dance on it." She snorts. "Not with these knees." You add a piece of wood to the fire. It flares up, orange and loud. You crossed a river again today. Because you had to. Because this city makes you. The third night is always the worst. That's what someone said to you days ago. Some old man, maybe a lamplighter or a carpenter. Back when the storm was still tearing through the streets and you didn't know which way was up. You didn't ask him what he meant at the time. You thought he was just being dramatic, maybe poetic. But now, as the city slides into its third full night of post-blizzard blackout, the words won't stop echoing in your skull. The third night is when hope thins out, when the adrenaline wears off, when the novelty of candlelight dinners and soup cooked on stoves built from rubble starts to taste like defeat. When the snow has stopped falling but still hasn't melted, and you realise there's no thaw coming soon, not tomorrow, not next week, maybe not for months. The third night is when your body starts to wear out and your brain follows. You feel it as soon as the sun sets. The temperature drops like a rock and the fire struggles to keep up. The last of your scavenged wood burns fast. It doesn't last long. You feed it slowly, measured, stingy, watching the flames the way a banker might watch gold. You count the pieces left and try to figure out how many more nights you'll need to ration. Mrs. Riley's not doing well. She doesn't say it, but you can tell. Her cheeks are flushed and not in the good way. Her voice has taken on a slur, slow and syrupy. You touch her forehead and pull back like it burned you. The fever's back. Maybe it never left, Maybe it's just gotten better at hiding. She tries to smile at you, but her lips are dry, cracked, and when she coughs it rattles. You offer her snowmelt water and a pinch of peppermint from the church, and she thanks you like you brought her champagne. You want to stay by her side, but the cold presses in from every wall. So you do what you've started doing every evening. You walk, not far, just a loop around the block. You tell yourself it's to check on people, maybe help dig out a stoop, maybe pass along news, but really, you just need to move, to remind your body it still works. to remind your heart it's still beating. Outside, the city is stuck in a strange twilight. The sky is cloudy again, low and colourless. The snow glows faintly in the street lamps that have started to flicker back to life, maybe half of them. Some blocks are still black, others have these strange halos of light, soft and golden, diffused through the ice crust on the lamps. It makes the city look like a painting, beautiful, haunted. People don't talk much tonight. They nod when you pass. A few say your name. A couple ask about Mrs. Riley. One woman offers you half a potato, another asks if she can borrow a book. You lend her a water-damaged almanac and hope she doesn't notice that it ends in 1884. You see a man sitting on a rooftop, his legs dangling over the edge, a bottle in his lap. You shout up to him. He waves and says, "Not jumping, just thinking." You give him a thumbs up. "Try not to freeze your thoughts solid," you call back. Down on Grand Street, someone set up a music box in the snow. You don't know where they found it or how it's still working, but it's playing something slow and warbly. A waltz, a sad one. You and four strangers just stop and listen for a few minutes, letting the sound settle into your bones. Then someone laughs softly. Sounds like a funeral for the city, and you all move on. You turn the corner and run into Clara, the baker's daughter, about 15 and always dressed like she's chasing a train. She's pulling a sled with a sack of flour on it and cursing like a sailor. "Where'd you get that?" you ask. "Traded a mirror and 2 pairs of socks," she grins. "I think I got robbed." You help her get it back to the bakery, where her father greets her like she just won a war. He hands you a biscuit. It's still warm. You try not to cry. Here's your historical detail. During the third night of the blizzards of 1888, temperatures across New York dropped to near record lows, somewhere around 6 degrees, with wind chills below zero. With no central heating, many residents burned furniture, books, even clothes to survive. The third night was when the death toll began to rise quietly, from exposure, starvation and illness brought on by the cold. It wasn't dramatic, just constant. Fringe detail? Some people swore they heard things on the third night. Voices in the wind, knocks on doors where no one stood. One woman claimed her dead husband whispered to her from the snowdrift outside. Another insisted she heard the Statue of Liberty crying. Of course, she also claimed to have a pet squirrel named William, who taught her to knit. So, grain of salt. There's scholarly disagreement about how much of the city fell into despair versus resilience. Diaries and letters from survivors vary wildly. Some describe the third night as a moment of profound community, the time when neighbourhoods banded together. Others say it was when things broke down, when kindness got hoarded and desperation took root. The truth is probably somewhere in between. You return home long after full dark, your cheeks burn, your gloves are soaked. Mrs. Riley hasn't moved. You check her again, still breathing but shallow. You add the last of the wood to the stove. The fire flares, then dims. You wish it could last longer. You sit beside her and tell her stories, made-up ones. You tell her that the train to Albany ran today, and that the mayor is handing out hot cider on every corner. That the statue in Union Square is wearing a scarf now, thanks to the kids on a dead man's drop. That spring is just around the corner and the snow will melt any second now. She smiles without opening her eyes. Outside, the wind starts up again, just a little. A reminder. The third night is the worst, but you're still here. The first thing you notice is the absence of sound. No howling wind, no rattling window panes, no groans from snow-laden roofs, just a soft, eerie stillness that makes you pause mid-step as if the city is holding its breath. You step outside into the pale light of dawn, and for the first time in days, the sky above you isn't the colour of ash. It's blue. Fragile, cracked glass blue stretching over the city like something long forgotten. And there's the sun, actual sun, pale and squinting through the haze like it's just woken up too. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry, so you just stand there stunned. As the stillness settles over your shoulders, there's something holy about it. Not in the hymn-singing, organ-playing kind of way, but in the way a battlefield looks the morning after. The wreckage, the quiet, the realization that the storm has, at long last, passed. You're not alone. Doors creak open along the block. Faces peek out, wary, hollow-eyed, blinking in the sudden brightness like cave dwellers emerging after a century underground. A child steps into the snow barefoot before being yanked back by an arm. A man across the street simply sits on his stoop and stares at the sky. You glance up at the rooftops. Icicles as long as swords hang from the eaves, glittering like chandeliers. Chimneys puff tentatively, soot streaked white against the thawing sky. The streets are still blanketed, of course, but the edges of everything are softening. Snow melts in odd little rivers down the gutters, curling around drifts like tiny, polite escape attempts. But it's what the storm left behind that really hits you. You head south, following the same path you've walked for days, but now you can finally see what's been buried. Trolley cars locked mid-route, frozen like sculptures, horses stiff in the harness, heads bowed under makeshift tarps, telegraph poles snapped like matchsticks, wires slinking down onto the snow like metal snakes. You find a lamppost that's been bent in half under the weight of an avalanche from a nearby roof. And then there are the buildings. You pass a tenement where the third floor has collapsed completely, the walls peeled back like a dollhouse. You can see into what used to be someone's living room. A single chair, a painting still hanging, a broken violin half buried in snow. Another building has caved inward entirely, its staircase visible through the ruins like the spine of some great dead animal. And you realise something uncomfortable. This isn't the end of the disaster. This is the beginning of the reckoning. For 3 days, survival was the goal. Just get through it. Just make it to the next fire, the next warm spoonful, the next breath. But now, with the snow no longer falling and the wind no longer screaming, the city has to face itself. What's broken? What's missing? Who's missing? You find the body of a man near the corner of Eldridge and Stanton. He's curled into the crook of a doorway, covered by nothing but a dusting of snow. His face is slack, peaceful almost. You don't know his name, but you mark his spot with a broom handle and keep walking. Someone will come for him later, hopefully. And then, finally, you hear something. Voices, not desperate ones, not shouting or panic, but the slow rise and fall of conversation. You follow the sound to the corner, where a group has gathered around a table dragged out from a bakery. Someone's carved thick hunks of bread. Another has set up a pot of coffee on a portable grate. The aroma nearly makes you dizzy. You ask if they need help. They hand you a mug, no questions, just quiet gratitude. The warmth seeps through your gloves. You take a sip. It's terrible, burnt and bitter, and it might be the best thing you've ever tasted. You hear stories. Everyone has one. A woman spent 3 nights in a pigeon coop on the roof living on seeds and melted snow. A dock worker tunnelled through 6 feet of snow to rescue his neighbour's cat. A boy found his way home by tapping along a fence in total darkness, counting each post. No one talks about politics, no one mentions the mayor. There's no energy for blame yet, just breath and bread. Here's your historical fact. The morning of March the 14th, 1888, 3 days after the blizzard began, was the first day New Yorkers awoke to still skies and silence. The snow had stopped overnight. Winds died down. For many, it was the first time they could truly see the scale of the devastation. Buildings had collapsed. Thousands of telegraph and power lines lay twisted in the snow. Trains remained frozen in place, and yet relief began to spread, slowly, cautiously, like sunrise over ruins. Fringe detail. There's a single line in one survivor's journal that says, "The silence on the 4th morning was louder than the wind." Another described it as a god-sized hush. One man claimed to have seen birds fly again that morning, sparrows swooping over the drifts like nothing had happened. A woman wrote to her sister that the city looked like a frozen battlefield abandoned by the angels. There's debate among historians over whether the break in the storm came suddenly or gradually. Some claim the winds tapered slowly over the course of the 3rd night. Others insist it was like a switch, roaring madness 1 hour, complete stillness the next. But everyone agrees, when it stopped, the shock was just as profound as the storm itself. You return home slowly, coffee still in hand. You pass people with shovels slung over their shoulders like rifles. Others carry buckets, ropes, wood, pots, tools. The city is preparing not for more snow but for the thaw, for the slow, painful process of crawling back to normal. Mrs. Riley is still asleep when you get back. You wrap a scarf tighter around her and sit by the fire. It's just embers now. You'll need more wood soon. You always need more wood. Outside, the light stretches longer than it has in days. Shadows return, shapes come back, the city, beaten and bruised, shows its edges again. You take a breath and feel something shift inside your chest. Not quite relief, not quite joy, but something closer, something like a beginning. The snow doesn't leave quietly. It stays locked in place. stubborn and solid. Like it owns the streets now and isn't ready to hand back the keys, but the people, oh, they're done waiting. The moment the sun showed up, something inside the city clicked back into motion, like a spring winding tight after days of being frozen solid. This morning the digging begins, the real kind. Not the desperate clawing you did on the first day, not the shoveler's cane trek through waist-deep drifts. This is organised, intentional, war on snow. You wake up to the sound of metal on stone, shovels, dozens of them. You rise, groggy and sore, and shuffle to the window. Outside, the whole street is alive. People are hacking, lifting, heaving. One man swings a pickaxe with a rhythm like he's drumming a funeral march. A woman is using the end of a broken table leg to wedge apart chunks of ice. A kid is hauling snow in a wheelbarrow that squeaks and sags, half held together with rope. You open the door and someone immediately thrusts a shovel into your hand. If you're standing, the man says, you're digging. And that's it, you join the line. At first, you're not even sure where to start. The sidewalk, the alley, the buried fire hydrant that no one's been able to find since day one. But someone shouts out, "We're going for the trolleys today!" And suddenly everyone has a shared mission. You follow them down to the corner where a row of streetcars lies half submerged, roofs barely peeking out from the snow. The first one is a sad sight. Frozen windows, wheels encased in thick ice, a pigeon perched on the roof like it's claimed the thing as new territory. You dig, hard. Your back screams in protest. Your arms go numb from the cold and then hot from the effort. You keep your rhythm steady. Scoop, lift, toss, repeat. Around you people grunt and curse and cheer as another panel is freed. Another door chipped open, another set of wheels finally exposed to daylight. Someone opens the trolley door. It groans, sticks, then gives way with a crunch. Inside it's like a tomb. Frozen seats, a few old newspapers, and on one bench, tucked against the window, is a cracked leather satchel with someone's initials stitched in gold. You take it gently and pass it to the man nearest you. He cradles it like it might bite. It takes hours to clear just one car, but by the time you're done, you can see the tracks again. Metal rails gleaming faintly in the sun, like veins running through the city. For the first time, you feel like you're part of something forward-moving. A comeback. Not dramatic, not sudden, but real. Someone sets up a makeshift fire nearby. Tea is brewed in a battered tin pot, passed around in shared mugs and ladles. It's gritty and vaguely licorice-flavoured, but no one complains. One woman starts humming, another joins in. Pretty soon, half the block is singing a song no one knows the words to, just the rhythm, steady, warm, alive. You hear about other dig-outs happening across the city. Uptown, they've cleared a full bakery, and are handing out stale pastries like treasure. Downtown, a team finally uncovered the entrance to a flooded wine cellar. The owner, a notoriously grouchy man, reportedly wept when he saw it, and offered bottles to everyone on the crew. "To thaw out our insides," he said, "and possibly our dignity." Here's your historical fact. After the storm broke, the dig-out operation became one of the largest spontaneous civic efforts in New York's history. With city services barely functioning, it fell to neighbourhoods to organise. Volunteers shoveled out roads, rail lines and entryways. In some cases, prisoners were brought in to help dig under police supervision. The city paid a handful of men to help clear the elevated train lines, but most of the real work came from citizens with whatever tools they could find. Fringe detail? One man supposedly used an antique sabre from the Revolutionary War to dig out the front steps of his boarding house. Another story, though questionable, claims a woman used hot molasses poured down a flight of stairs to melt the snow faster. It worked, apparently, until rats showed up by the dozens to lick it clean. That particular experiment ended quickly. Scholars note that the speed of the dig-out varied wildly. Wealthier areas were cleared first, either because of influence or because they had more manpower. Poorer neighbourhoods often had to fend entirely for themselves, and some streets remained impassable for over a week. There are debates about whether this uneven response pushed the city toward broader infrastructure reform in the years to come, or whether it was just another footnote in the long list of disasters New York shrugged off. You don't think about policy when you're digging. You just focus on the next scoop, the next patch of ice, the next doorway to clear. At one point, you help a woman uncover the stairs to her basement apartment. She weeps when the last drift is gone, not from joy, but from sheer relief. Inside, she's got 3 dogs, 1 cat, and an uncle who hasn't spoken since day 2. You help her haul in firewood and check the windows. They're intact. That's rare. Back home, Mrs. Riley has gave an alert. Fever's broken for now. Her cheeks have colour again and she's nibbling on a crust of bread like it's roast duck. You smell like effort, she says as you come in. You should smell the trolley, you reply, slumping into a chair. She raises an eyebrow. That bad? That's sacred, you say. It's still got its bell. The 2 of you sit in silence for a while, listening to the city outside. You can hear shovels, hammers, laughter, a violin. Someone's cooking onions 2 floors up. It smells like a future. You light the stove and toss in a few last scraps of wood. It flares up with a warm, satisfying sigh. You wonder how long it'll take to clear every street, to unearth the rest of the city, to find the bodies still hidden beneath the drifts. But that's tomorrow's wait. For tonight, you've earned this. A dry chair, a warm stove, and the sound of a city digging its way back into the light. You don't sleep much that night. Not because of the cold, though it's still there, creeping under doors and fingernails like a rude ghost, but because your brain won't stop tallying. Names, losses, miracles. The numbers flicker in your head like a faulty lantern. How many people didn't make it through the 3rd night? How many basements never got unburied? How many fires went unput out? How many mouths unfilled? How many faces no one thought to look for? By morning, the city has begun its 2nd act. Not recovery, not yet, but something like the counting of scars. It's the day of reckoning. The day the numbers start to mean something. You head out early, drawn by a strange quiet. Not the eerie silence from during the storm, but the heavy hush of morning. People move more slowly now, like they're tiptoeing through the wreckage of something sacred. As if they've all collectively realised what they lived through, and what others didn't. Down on Broome Street, a group of neighbours is laying out bodies. Not on display, this isn't spectacle, but with care. Blankets draped, faces covered. Someone's lined up candles along the edge of the snowbank like it's a makeshift altar. A boy no older than 10 lights each one with a shaking match. When his hand slips, a man nearby leans in to steady him. No words, just a nod. You ask how many. The man answers without looking at you. 9 here. He gestures toward the mound. More on the other blocks. They just haven't found them yet. You offer your hands and you help move the next one. You don't ask who he was. It doesn't matter, really. You wrap him, place him gently in the line. Someone hands you a name tag to write on. You leave it blank. Better nothing than the wrong name. Up on the 14th, the coal depot has reopened, and people are lined up by the hundreds. Word has spread, £10 per household, first come, first serve. You walk the line and hear the low hum of tired conversations. One woman recounts how her brother burned the legs off his kitchen table to keep the baby warm. Another man says his chimney finally unclogged, just in time to stop the frostbite in his toes from spreading further. Someone mentions the dead mailman, the one who collapsed after his last delivery. He should be buried in marble, someone else mutters. No one disagrees. You pass an old woman clutching a bundle to her chest. She says it's her cat, but it doesn't move. You don't ask any more questions. Here's what the officials are saying, at least according to the latest flyer nailed to a telegraph pole. Over 200 dead in New York City alone. More across New England, dozens buried, frozen, drowned. Children, elderly, postal workers, street vendors, travellers' callers caught between stops. Entire families found days later in collapsed brownstones, and that's just what they know. There are more under the snow, everyone knows that. You hear stories that stay with you longer than they should. A blind man who froze with his seeing eye son beside him, arms still linked. A seamstress who spent all 3 nights in her attic, sewing coats from scraps and lowering them to neighbours in buckets. A ferry captain who died with his hands still on the wheel, his ship encased in ice like a tomb, and for every tragedy, there's an escape. Like the boy who lit his shoes on fire to keep warm, then danced in the snow until someone tackled him and smothered the flames. Or the man who fell into a drift and didn't come out for 2 days, only to be dug out by a dog looking for a bone. Or the girl who broke both arms jumping from a burning building, then asked if the piano survived. It didn't. Historical fact. The final death toll from the blizzard of 1888 in New York City was officially recorded at over 200, though many historians suspect the true number was higher. Some estimate upwards of 400 when including nearby towns and boroughs. Many of the dead were found days or even weeks later, unearthed slowly during the dig-outs. Some were never recovered, their names lost to drift and time. Fringe fact? There are rumours, unconfirmed, not naturally, of an icebound funeral procession that never made it to the cemetery. They say the mourners and the coffin all vanished somewhere near Queens, their wagon buried so deeply that no one ever found it. For years afterward, people claimed to see ghostly hoofprints near the old crossing road on cold mornings, or to hear the faint tolling of a bell beneath the snow. Scholars continue to debate the storm's death toll and how it was counted. Some argue that the poor were undercounted or ignored entirely, their deaths unrecorded because they didn't die in official locations. Others point out how many people simply disappeared, wandered off in the whiteout, fell through the river ice, froze between neighbourhoods, and were never found. The storm took more than lives, it took names. Back on your block, someone's posted a list to the fence, names of the missing. You read through them, feeling your throat tighten. You don't know all of them, but a few hit home. The butcher's wife, the man with the limp who sold newspapers on the corner, the girl who used to sing on the stoop in the mornings. Her name's underlined 3 times. You add a name, one you heard on your walk, just to be sure. You print it slowly, carefully, and then you stare at the list like it might rearrange itself and tell you who's safe. Mrs. Riley's better by evening. She sits up, asks for tea, and thanks you with a weak smile that feels like sunlight. You look older, she says. You nod. You feel older, like this week carved years into your bones. You give her a spoonful of honey, rationed, rare, but worth it. She licks the spoon like it's made of gold. You tell her what you saw today, the dead, the living, the man in the trolley line who broke down crying when the woman ahead of him gave him her place. She listens, she doesn't say much. Then softly she asks, "Do you think the city will remember them all?" You pause, staring into the fire. "No," you say, "but we will." Outside the night falls again, but this one is different. Not the endless dark of before. There's a softness now, the wind is quiet, the stars are out, you can see them, and in the distance a church bell rings for no reason at all. You sit back and let it echo. If you hang around long enough after a disaster, the stories start to shift. At first, everyone sticks to what's known. How deep the snow got, who died, where the ice cracked, what was burned. But as the days stretch on and the shock softens into memory, something weird begins to happen. People start adding colour, drama, and just the slightest bit of flair. And before long, the city becomes a snow-glazed stage for some of the strangest, most twisted little blizzard stories you've ever heard. You're sitting near the stove, half asleep, half starving, when your neighbour from 2 doors down pops his head in. Mr. Jacoby. Always smells faintly of shoe polish and pickled herring. He doesn't even say hello. Just launches in. You hear about the cow? You blink at him. What cow? He steps fully into the room, holding a tattered scarf in one hand and a crust of bread in the other, like both are weapons. The cow. From the slaughterhouse down near Delancey. Blasted thing got loose on day 2 of the storm. They say it was last seen galloping through snow up to its shoulders. Horns glazed with ice like it was dipped in sugar. Knocked over a police officer and kept going, still hasn't been found. You stare at him. He takes a triumphant bite of bread. Later that afternoon, someone else swears that one of the ships stuck in the harbour got lifted partially out of the water by a freak build-up of ice. Like the sea was trying to spit it out, she says, eyes wide. Captain didn't believe it until he saw the horizon from the wrong angle. You ask what happened after that. She shrugs. Ship's still there, leaning sideways, looks drunk. It only gets stranger. You hear about a man who tried to build a snow chimney for his stove, started as a vent, turned into an entire snow-constructed fireplace, sticking out of his roof like some kind of Arctic art project. It worked until it didn't. The smoke backed up and turned his apartment into a slow-cooked sauna. He was found 3 hours later in his long johns, sipping tea on the roof. Or the post office on 23rd that, according to some, spontaneously burst its pipe so violently that water shot 30 feet into the air before freezing mid-arc. Made a whole sculpture, someone says. Looked like a frozen fountain, swear it. You pass a tavern window and see a chalkboard that reads, "Free drink if you can beat the bartender's blizzard tale." Below it, current champion, the man who found a fish in a chimney. No one can top that. Here's your historical fact. As the Great Blizzard of 1888 receded, the survivors, many traumatised, exhausted, and emotionally raw, began creating and passing around what historians now call blizzard lore. These were embellished, sometimes completely fictional stories that served as a form of catharsis, a way to process the bizarre, the awful, and the unexplainable. While many stories are based on half-truths, they were retold so often they became part of the storm's unofficial legacy. Fringe detail? There's a long-standing urban legend about the drifting coffin. Yes, that one. The story goes that during the storm an undertaker's cart was caught in the whiteout and overturned. Several coffins spilled into the snow, one of which began surfing along the icy drifts, driven by wind and gravity. Supposedly it crashed through a shop window uptown where the stunned owner simply left it there for 3 days, unable to move it. Some versions say the body inside was perfectly preserved. Others claim the coffin was empty, or opened. Scholars don't agree on whether the story has any factual basis. No newspapers at the time reported anything close to it, but letters and diaries from the weeks after the storm mentioned the runaway coffin, more than once. One old man wrote, "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd have called it whiskey madness. So, either it happened, or it happened enough in people's minds." You start keeping a little notebook with your favourite ones. You jot down the tale of the frozen rooster, found perched on a windowsill, perfectly upright, mid-crow, ice glinting from its beak. Or the dog that dug its way from one side of Manhattan to the other, tunnelling through basements like a furry miner. You include the story of the man who tried to cook bacon on a hot iron and burned down his snow shelter instead. But not all the stories are funny. Some are just odd, like the rumours of mirages. Yes, mirages during the storm. People claimed that in the height of the whiteout they saw buildings that weren't there. Shops glowing with warm light, music drifting through the storm. One man said he walked a full block through snow and smoke toward what he thought was a church, only to reach it and find nothing but air. He stumbled face first into a drift and nearly suffocated. You heard about him from a nurse. She says he came into the infirmary half frozen and muttering, "It was real." The doors were open. She thinks it was hallucination from cold and hunger. You're not so sure. The storm did strange things to people. And maybe the city wanted to be more than it was, just for a second. There's also this persistent tale of the snowman. Not the kind kids build, but a real one. Tall, silent, shadowy. Supposedly spotted during the worst of the blizzard, always at the edges of visibility. Watching. Always watching. A woman near the waterfront claims she saw it standing beside the wreckage of a ferry, unmoving, snow clinging to its back like a second skin. A child on the Upper West Side swore it walked him home. You think people just need a shape for their fear? Something they can point to and say, "That's what scared me." Not the cold, not the silence, not the sky swallowing the city. Just a figure, a form, a monster you can see. You don't tell Mrs. Riley most of these. She's still recovering, and besides, her sense of humour has a strict upper limit when it comes to freezing-related death. But one night, as you're sitting by the fire, you mention the coffin, just to see. She raises an eyebrow. "You believe that?" You shrug. "I think people believe it." She chuckles dry and low. "People believe a lot of nonsense when the world goes sideways." You sip your tea. "Yeah, but sometimes the nonsense is the only thing keeping them warm." Outside, the snow is starting to melt in slow, stubborn patches. You can hear it plip, plip, plip as it falls from rooftops and eaves. The sidewalks are still slick, the streets still half buried. But the stories? They're everywhere, echoing from stoops whispered between windows, etched into notebooks like yours. And maybe when all the records are filed and the headlines fade, it'll be these stories. Strange, funny, sad, surreal, that carry the real memory of the blizzard. Not just what happened, but how it felt. Not just how New York froze, but how it dreamed. By now, most of the snow is less pristine postcard and more grimy slush. What was once sculptural, silent and terrifying has begun to sag and collapse under its own weight. The white has turned grey, then brown, then nearly black in places, splashed with soot, mud and the remnants of too many boot soles. And with the thaw creeping in, so too comes something else, something equally inevitable, the finger pointing. It starts quietly like everything else in this city. A grumble at a fire station, a muttered complaint in a breadline. Then someone pastes a poster on a lamppost that simply reads, "Where was the mayor?" Big block letters, no signature, just the question. You see a second one on 5th, then a third, painted directly on the side of a building in coal black script, bold and dripping. How many died while he hid? people begin to talk. Not just about who froze or who survived, but who failed. You pass a group clustered around a man on a box who's shouting loud enough to draw a crowd. "They knew it was coming," he cries. "They knew and they did nothing. No alerts, no carriages deployed, no warming centres opened. They left us to die while the officials sat by their fires drinking sherry." Someone in the back yells, "And where were you, huh?" The man doesn't miss a beat. "Digging bodies out of the 2nd Avenue line, that's where." A few cheers erupt. Some people walk away, but most stay, eyes narrowed, arms crossed, listening. Even in disaster, it turns out New Yorkers are still New Yorkers. They want someone to blame. And honestly, who could blame them? Rumours fly fast now that the city commissioners argued over whether to shut down the elevated trains, until one of them got stranded himself, that the mayor was unreachable for 2 full days while snow buried the city, that a telegraph operator tried to warn the papers but was shut down to avoid panic. You don't know how much of it is true, but you do know that the people on your street had no warnings, no support and no firewood unless they went out and chopped it down themselves. Some folks, though, are turning the blame the other direction, toward each other. You hear someone complain that their neighbour hoarded bread, that the rich stockpiled coal while downtown burned their own fences, that a shopkeeper sold salt at 10 times the price, and a grocer made people shovel snow just to get a carrot. A man on your block swears the next-door tailor lied about having a working stove just so no one would ask to share it. You see a broken window on Orchard, likely smashed by someone who wasn't in the mood to debate morality. Here's your historical fact. After the blizzard of 1888, public outrage exploded across New York. Citizens demanded to know why the city hadn't responded faster, why warnings weren't given, why snow removal was disorganised, and why key figures, including the mayor, were absent for the worst parts of the storm. Investigations were launched, but few officials were punished. The infrastructure improvements came slowly, if at all. Fringe fact: a few surviving letters accuse certain city officials of fleeing by private sleigh to out-of-town estates as the storm hit. One woman claimed her cousin saw a judge being pulled through the snow by a team of white horses, escorted by a police sergeant, like Napoleon retreating from Moscow. There's no concrete evidence, but the image stuck, and the scholarly debate is mostly about how much blame can really be placed on anyone in a time before accurate forecasting. Some argue the storm came too fast, too violently, and overwhelmed even the best-laid plans. Others say city leaders were so obsessed with appearances and economy that they refused to take early action, even when warnings from other cities came through. Some historians argue this storm marked a key shift in how government was expected to handle natural disaster. Others say it was just another example of power saving itself first. You're not interested in debates. You're watching it all unfold in real time. You see the little power struggles playing out on every corner. A clergyman arguing with a sanitation worker about whose church should receive snow clearing priority. A shop owner refusing to reopen unless his storefront is fully dug out by someone else. A fire chief barking orders while people ignore him entirely. But there's praise being passed around too, quietly and usually behind the backs of the praised. A woman points at a teenager hauling slush buckets and says, "That one brought my father back on a sled." A man nods toward a bent old lady hunched over a shovel and whispers, "She saved my boy," pulled him out of a drift with one arm. A baker who gave out loaves for free is now referred to, without irony, as Saint Harold of Bleecker. And somewhere in the East Side, someone's carving a statue of a dog. You're not even joking. A stone dog. Real big ears. Supposedly saved 3 people and led rescuers to a collapsed boarding house. You haven't seen the statue yet, but you've seen the dog. It likes scraps, barks at ghosts, good instincts. Still, none of it stops the whispers. By midweek, there's talk of a public hearing, a formal investigation. Some say the newspapers are digging deep, planning front-page exposés with names, dates and receipts. Others say it'll all blow over the moment the ice fully melts and the carriages roll again. You're not so sure. This city holds a grudge when it wants to. At home, Mrs. Riley reads you a clipping from a recovered newspaper, printed the day before the storm but never delivered. High winds expected along the coast, it says, with all the casual understatement of a doomed sailor waving goodbye. Light snow possible inland, she cackles. Light snow? That's rich. You make her soup with half a turnip and a few pinches of stale pepper. She says it tastes like victory, then promptly sneezes into it. You talk long into the night, swapping stories from the past few days like playing cards. Who dug, who shared, who didn't. And then she says something that sticks with you. The blizzard didn't change people. It revealed them. You don't say anything, but you know she's right. Outside, posters keep going up. One says, "Our city froze, our leaders disappeared." Another, "Next time we prepare ourselves." And one, just one, says, "Thank you to the neighbours who dug us out. Maybe that one's yours." It's strange what you remember after something like this. Not the big, dramatic moments, the snow-choked skyline or the howling nights or the bodies wrapped in blankets, but the small things. The flick of a match in the dark, the taste of lukewarm coffee from a tin ladle, the sound of someone else's shovel echoing down your street like a heartbeat. These are the things that linger. And now, as the city starts to unfreeze for your good, it's these tiny details that stay stitched into the fabric of your mind, refusing to melt. The sun's higher today, really high. Not just peeking sheepishly through the clouds, but full-on blaring, like it's trying to make up for lost time. You feel the warmth on your face for the first time in nearly a week, and you actually stop walking just to soak it in. Eyes closed, mouth slightly open, arms slack at your sides like a thawed-out scarecrow. For a second, you could almost forget the storm ever happened. Almost. But then, a horse-drawn cart creaks past you, wheels grinding through a paste of mud and ice chunks, carrying what looks like half a roof on its bed. A man walks alongside it, holding the reins in one hand and a broken window pane in the other. No coat, just shirt sleeves and a far-off look in his eye. You recognise that look. It's the same one in the mirror. Everywhere you go, the clean-up is in full swing now. Not just digging, but repairing, fixing, salvaging. A crew is already patching a collapsed awning on Canal Street. On Mulberry, someone's stacking bricks back into the shape of what used to be a wall. You see people scooping slush out of their shops with ladles, their aprons soaked, their jaws set. No more waiting, no more rationing hope. This is the city you know, bruised, blistered, furious, and finally moving again. Near the harbour, the ferry docks are a mess of tangled lines, ice-stained hulls, and crates tipped at odd angles. But the ferrymen are back. A few even joke as they work, tossing ropes and shouting over the groaning boards. One of them sees you watching and grins. "Might sail to Cuba, just to dry off." "Take me with you," you yell back. "No room. Got a boat full of bad decisions already." You walk past a church where candles still flicker on the steps, names scrawled on little paper tags, some already fluttering loose in the breeze. You bend to reattach one. It reads simply, Ruth. 6 years old, laughed at the snow, still looking. Your hands shake as you tie it tighter. Here's your historical fact. In the weeks following the Great Blizzard of 1888, New York City underwent a transformation, not just physically, but psychologically. The storm exposed deep flaws in the city's preparedness, infrastructure, and leadership. In response, citizens demanded change. One major shift? The movement to bury all telegraph and power lines underground. Until then, wires had been strung overhead like spaghetti across the skyline, easy targets for wind and ice. After the storm, that changed. Slowly, stubbornly, but definitively. Fringe fact? There's a persistent theory that the blizzard sped up the birth of the subway. It would be nearly a decade before the first underground line opened, but the argument had begun here, in the snow and silence. People were tired of being trapped, tired of waiting, and the blizzard became the perfect symbol, a frozen city above, and the promise of something better below. Scholars disagree on just how much credit the storm deserves for pushing infrastructure reform. Some argue the changes were already in motion. Others say the blizzard lit a fire no one could ignore. What is clear is that New York learned from this. Though true to form, it also forgot just as quickly in some ways. Memory is short. When the sun's out and business resumes, you walk toward the bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, still covered in drifts but now visibly clearing. A team of engineers is out surveying damage, marking stonework, yelling about stress points and frostbite in the cables. You pause halfway across, look out over the East River. No one's walking across the ice now. It's breaking up in sharp, glinting plates, bumping and grinding like old ships in a crowded harbour. And then you realise something. You're not cold. Not just less cold, warm. Your fingers move freely in your gloves. Your breath doesn't fog as thick. Your shoulders, once hunched against the weight of wind and fear, now feel light. Like the city itself, you're loosening. You spend the afternoon helping your street dig out a back alley, just wide enough for a supply cart to pass through. Everyone pitches in. The landlord who never speaks more than a grunt, the kids who once ruled the sled hill, even Mr. Jacoby, still telling stories about the runaway cow, who turns out to be a surprisingly efficient shoveler. At sunset, someone lights a bonfire in a barrel. People gather, hands out, faces orange in the flame glow. A bottle of something brown and sharp gets passed around. Someone pulls out a harmonica. It's out of tune, and no one knows the song, but it works. You sit next to Mrs. Riley, who's bundled in 3 scarves and wearing a pair of boots that clearly don't match. She watches the flames, eyes half-lidded. "They'll be talking about this for years," she says. "Centuries, maybe," you say. She nods slowly. "They'll get most of it wrong." Probably, but some of it'll be true. You think about what parts, the silence, the coffin, the violin buried in snow, the dog who saved 3 people. Maybe, maybe not. But you know what'll be remembered for sure. The digging. The way people, against all reason, kept digging, kept walking, kept waking up. That night you dream of the snow, not the biting kind, not the kind that swallows cities whole, just soft flakes, drifting through lamplight, landing quietly on rooftops that already held warmth. The blizzard is over. You survived it. And tomorrow, New York becomes itself again. Not in spite of the storm, but because of it. So you're still here, eyes heavy, mind somewhere between this snow-blanketed New York and the comfort of your own pillow. That's good. That means you made it. Through the storm, through the digging, through the noise and the silence, and the strange little stories left behind. Maybe you're still thinking about the boy who set his shoes on fire, or the woman in the pigeon coop, or the dog whose statue is probably still gathering pigeon droppings somewhere near the East River. Every one of them left a footprint in the snow, and in history. But before we leave the Great Blizzard of 1888 behind, let's take one last moment to sit with what it meant. Not just what froze, or broke, or was buried, but what rose afterward. Because that's always the real story, isn't it? Not the disaster itself, but what people build in its wake. The firewood passed between strangers. The bread traded for buttons. The songs hummed over cracked mugs and burned soup. In the end, it wasn't just ice that blanketed New York. It was effort. Relentless, gritty, shoulder-to-shoulder effort. This wasn't the storm that ended New York. It was the one that revealed it. And yeah, maybe the city got knocked off its feet. Maybe it lost more than it ever counted. But it also found things, courage in alleyways, humour in hunger, and a kind of stubborn, frost-bitten pride that only grows when everything else gets stripped away. You lived it now, for 30 chapters, for 30,000 words. You walked the snow-blind streets, you tied rope to your waist, you held a lantern in the dark and lit the stove when the matches ran out. You did what New Yorkers have always done when the sky turns against them. You kept moving forward. So now, as you finally slide under the covers, or shut off the lights, or pull your hoodie up tight, I hope you feel that little spark inside, the one that says, yeah, I'd have made it too. And hey, you probably would have. Sleep well, tomorrow's warmer.